are not on this committee. We'll call the meeting to order, please. This is Thursday, May 4th, 2017 committee meetings. Our first committee that will be meeting will be the licensing committee. And then we're going to flip a committee or two around here with enforcement committee will be coming on second, just for those of you that are on the committee to know that you need to be in attendance. Mr. Elmore, Chair, Licensing.
Okay. On the agenda, we have 3 or 4 items from the Licensing Committee to address, and I'd like to take a few minutes and just summarize, take each one and summarize it one at a time. The first 2 are very similar. The first one being, well, both of these first 2 relate to a person asking for asking for CPE to be qualified related to a certification that they were taking the exam for. The first one being the CAIA Association, where Justin Rickard has asked us to qualify 200 hours of preparation time that he was involved with in sitting for this exam. And this exam relates to the alternative investment industry. As you may or may not know, alternative investments are investments like things other than stocks, bonds, and cash. That includes things like private equity, hedge funds, managed futures, real estate, maybe commodities and derivative contracts, those kinds of things. And this certification program is recommended for professions like financial advisors, legal and journalistic type specialties in order to get this certification. So I think we as a board have approved in the past similar certifications such as CMA, FINRA, Life Office Management, CFA, just to name a few. So I would like to open this up to our committee, the licensing committee, and other board members as well, see if anyone has any issues related to this. Otherwise, I think it's very similar to what we may have approved in the past.
But we usually do these as general CPE, right? Just other?
As far as the category?
Yeah.
Actually, most of them typically have a technical category associated with them. Most of them fall into management. I have a few that are A&A, and we only have one listed as other. So we would need to probably establish what category you would like to see it fall under.
Have y'all looked at that to see if there's how it potentially could break out?
I would have recommended management on both of them.
This is a level 2 exam. Have we approved the level 1 exam?
No, it has not been brought before the board.
Okay.
I think it's a situation where nobody's ever asked us for level 1. Now, I'm assuming that if we approved level 2, that someone could come along and say, I've taken level 1, and I'd want, and that's a reasonable request. So, but barring anyone having an objection, I would recommend that tomorrow we approve this particular request.
Second that.
I'm going to have to recuse myself because I know Justin.
Okay. Then for the record, we need to note that Pam has recused herself.
The number of hours that we're approving this for, or?
I believe the rule takes care of that for us.
Oh, okay.
So the credit is awarded at a rate of 5 times the length of each exam. So one of these is 3 hours and one is 4 hours. I can't remember which is which. So it'll be 3 times 5 or 4 times 5. And it can be no more than 50% of their overall CPE.
Can you help me with the semantics here as far as at the committee level today, do we vote as a committee to vote tomorrow a certain, okay. So we have a motion and a second to approve this at the meeting tomorrow.
Recommend it.
Yeah, to vote to recommend it. Recommend to vote yes. So all those in favor, aye.
Aye. Aye.
And what category? I apologize. You want?
I think it would be management. I certainly don't think it would be technical.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk about that in a minute, too, so another topic. The second item would be a very similar one. This is a certification in CSCA, which is Certification in Strategy and Competitive Analysis exam. And this was brought by Cyril Rager, and the CPE provider was the Institute of Management Accountants, or IMA. Very similar situation where the individual had spent many hours studying for this certification. And I think we're going to see more and more of this because there's so many specializations now. And I think one question that we always need to consider is, does that certification apply in what this person is doing as a CPA or in their practice? So in these two individuals, in these two individual cases, I think they both are very similar in that these persons are practicing in this area of their practice. So here again, I would open it up for discussion for anyone who has a comment or a question. Very similar to the same thing as the first one.
The only, and I don't know how this would break down, but I think the only difference I would see is this potentially could qualify for some A&A hours. I'm not sure how much. I'm just looking at this
Yeah, on
outline.
page 2 of the outline, it shows that there's A&A, consulting, management. I don't know that we've ever gotten in. Wendy, you can help us with this. I don't think we've ever gotten into taking a certification like this and breaking it into more than one category.
Not according to the notes or the information I have from previously.
I think I would recommend that we go with management unless anybody has a...
Now, keep in mind, management does fall in our technical requirement, so it would meet the 40-hour requirement. Even
Not for the A&A folks that have to have available.
Correct.
I mean, I guess the only reason I would somewhat challenge that is because, like someone said, I think we're going to see more of this with the management accountants and the, I don't know what the criteria are, but to me, I think it needs to be, we need to consider actually what the content is. You know, I wouldn't have a problem breaking it down. What is this, how long is this test?
3 hours.
3 hours, so 15 hours is what they were getting. Again, I don't know how to break it out, but I mean, some of these outline topics, to me, could qualify as A&A.
I think, just as a matter of discussion, I think the one reason I would lean toward the management category is that the CPE provider in this case is the IMA. So they're not holding themselves out as experts in auditing, for example.
They do, well, I guess not, maybe they don't do a test work.
It says on the third page of our information here, it says this credential complements the BEC section of the CPA exam and further develops the CPA expertise in the area of management and consulting. So under the third page of this information, where it says this credential strongly complements and concepts and develops the expertise in the area of management and consulting.
I'm fine with that. I'm fine with that.
If you look at the detailed list of what's on the exam, there doesn't seem to be a significant amount of content related to audit and attest.
I think it's pretty general from what I could gather. Just
It's a long list,
Yeah,
and almost all of it is management, really.
Okay.
I'll move that we recommend to the full board to accept this as CPE based on our rules in calculating the amount of credit and under the management.
Second that.
All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Third item on this committee's agenda is the state-specific ethics course. We have a CPE provider here who has provided in the ethics course in the past. And as you remember, we have notified all of these providers that all of their current approvals for these courses would expire in December of 2017 when we would readdress our ongoing future. So this course has been resubmitted for approval, and all of these notations that you see in here out to the side have been provided by Wendy and her staff after going through the course and compliance with accurate information in our Tennessee ethics law as it is, or rules as they are in place now. So that then this course is one that has been approved in the past and used in our state. He's asking for reapproval, but I would think that if we did approve this course, that we would approve it only through December of 17, and that the approval would expire at that point. It would be approved subject to the changes that have been marked here, the editings.
I agree with that. Only comment I would make on this is, I don't think it's our responsibility to be proof in correcting and giving them the summary of the corrections. I mean, to me, I would look at it and say, look, it doesn't, because, I mean, there were some pretty significant errors or, you know, or lack of updates, I guess. I mean, I'd almost be inclined to say, we reviewed it and it doesn't meet it's not accurate, it's not up to date. You know, present one that is up to date with our rules.
And that's one of the reasons that you know, we've talked about having one course that we've approved and said this is it. Avoid having to spend, because there's obviously a lot of time spent reviewing this thing.
And that's my point.
Yeah.
And I think that we continue to get have these types of issues where we get someone submits material and it's not updated, and we've got to go in there and proof it, and you know, we don't have the resources to be doing that for everybody.
I agree that we should go with the one provider, but since the editing has already been done, it seems to me it's not a bad tool for communicating that this is not what we're looking for, so that people don't think that this board is just saying
I would make a motion that we don't approve it based on it doesn't meet the requirements, and we go ahead and start sending that message out. You know, if we approve it and only approve it for less than a year, there's an argument there that, well, you just approved it this year and now you're going to not allow it. But all of the editing and all that involved, I would just send it, I think we should just, in fact, I make the motion that we not approve it, and in the future, if it doesn't meet the requirements, that we wouldn't even consider it.
Okay, so if, and I think that's a valid point, but would we say, if we do turn it down based on its inaccuracies, would we suggest to this provider that they could resend it between now and December if they wanted to get approval for a short period of time?
Fine if they want to. It's a lot of effort for not a long time, but I mean, based on our rules, we can't deny it. I mean, our rules say that we still allow outside, you know, multiple parties of providers, right?
Doesn't exactly say that you have to approve anything. I mean,
we can't tell them they can't resubmit it and for us to consider it.
Right.
So, Wendy, have we in the past had courses similar to this where we had this many changes to make prior to approving it? Is this what we normally have done in the past? In
Yeah.
other words, send it back to them and say,
Right.
make
This is
these?
approved, provided that you make these
Subject-
changes, yeah.
And have there been this many in the ones in the past? Do you remember?
There've been quite a few.
There are a lot,
Yeah.
if I remember right, from what we went over last time, but
Because it does almost seem like they're asking, or
they're having our staff do their
counting on us-
work.
Yeah, they're counting on us to critique it for them. Yeah.
And I think the whole purpose of us discussing this before was to get away from that, so that we go to we proof it one time, we've got a single provider, and we don't have that task every time someone submits,
Well,
our staff does
I
it.
just question if somebody even looked at this. I mean, it's still got Mark Crocker as the executive director. I mean, that's a blatant mistake. I mean, just,
What is the status of the Tennessee Society's program that might be available for people who want to present a live presentation?
We have the online course.
Is that an option for this individual to use that outline that would already be pre-approved?
You've dealt with it more than I have. I think the outline is actually provided by the board to this group, and they're supposed to write the course based on that. Our course that we have available right now, do we have anything that they can?
Outline, which I think is the case with all vendors. Other vendors would use our course if for a live presentation. As Brad said, we're still about a month out from that live presentation. The online course is going to be launched.
So is this outline suitable to send to submitters to say this is what's required in your course doesn't meet the requirements?
Yes, I think really in this particular situation, we've had several rule changes in the past 6 months, and most of the problems with this course, except for the contact information, are surrounding those rule changes. They just are not, they don't encompass the new rule changes. And we've had several since maybe October of last year.
And that goes to the very point of us taking the measures that we're taking for the future, because these people aren't keeping up with those changes.
I mean, I can certainly, if it's this committee and board's wish to deny this, I can certainly relay it in a manner of that it just doesn't, there are several rule changes that have occurred, and those are not noted in these documents and would need to be an acceptable course. I have had the conversation with him that this would, if approved, would expire 12/31 due to the change of course of this board, so he is aware of that.
Kind of like that idea of just turning it down and not saying, I mean, if we critique it and send back the suggestions that we have, it almost becomes our responsibility to do that, and it becomes, if something's wrong, it's our fault instead of theirs, so, because we suggested the changes.
I sort of like Wendy's suggestion to give them broad feedback, because we've been giving feedback, and so I don't think we should
Yeah.
shift to a new policy before it really takes effect. So I like the broad feedback.
By broad, you mean just
Like
turn it down
Wendy
and say there's
said.
several.
we check the new rule changes that have
changes.
occurred. This doesn't meet those standards or whatever. Then,
Yeah.
I will second her motion if that's for Wendy.
Favor, aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Fourth item on our list for this committee is CPE fields of study. This is kind of an interesting topic where in your outline there, or in your packet of information, you have a page that's shown as fields of study, and it lists several areas that where the Tennessee definition or ranking of technical versus non-technical are different with NASBA's definition. And so if you look at these, first of all, we show the definition of technical there for Tennessee, and then two categories here, one that's subjects that NASBA considers technical that Tennessee does not, and then others that Tennessee does and NASBA does not. In my read of these categories, I think NASBA seems to be more accurate, in my opinion, as far as how they've defined these as opposed to ours. And I think some of these have evolved over time, and maybe just haven't been looked at as often as they should have. Any other thoughts from anybody else on these? Because, for example, subjects that NASBA says are technical get into brokers and dealers, energy options, ERISA compliance, HIPAA compliance. I mean, those are certainly technical issues that have specific rules that need to be related as opposed to a general management type category or some other. So, and then on the ones at the bottom, I think the big difference at the one on the bottom is that it's saying that under NASBA standards, it's technical if you're doing it for others as an advisory role, if you're advising someone else how to do some of these services, but if it's within your own firm, like MAP type issues, that they consider it to be not be technical. Is that a good
Very
distinction?
correct, yes.
Okay. So that's the main difference there.
How did Tennessee come to define some of these categories as technical? Does anyone know the short?
Well, it's supposed to be done by reading the definition, and then, but like anything else, there's a lot of subjective, personal feeling in it.
But I mean, when Tennessee decided to count business ethics as technical, or one of the other ones, what went into those decisions, I guess, is what I'm asking, and how did we come to be so different from NASBA?
I was unable to find a lot of information on the board actually considering this information. So the last time I can tell that the board discussed anything related to fields of study was 2005, which was a really long time ago. And so we've simply had an internal document, and I'm not quite sure how that was developed or how these things got coded. It could have been that they came in and, the previous executive directors decided where it should fall and it never came to the board, or it came to the board and I was unable to locate reference to that. I'm just not quite sure, but the key is, I think, as Larry had mentioned, that if you read the rule, the board has to feel comfortable that it fits that rule. And assuming that the board agrees with that, then I think we can include it as technical. I thought it was a good time since they changed this, or NASBA issued their new fields of study list. I noted the differences and couldn't note that this board had really talked about it in any recent time, so I thought it was good to talk about.
It is. And in answer to your question, I think it's probably pretty close to impossible to go back and figure out when each one of these got classified the way they are and why. It would be even harder to figure out why, but maybe you could get a time frame, but couldn't document.
But I think that's important for us to know. There's not a framework that we are looking at.
That's a good question, but I think Wendy's answer is probably very relevant in that they come in and get addressed, and maybe a previous administration didn't really know for sure, but they classified it a certain way. Maybe didn't even bring it to the board for discussion. So
I really appreciate you being so proactive on this and checking, because I could see where these sort of things could come up as questions from individuals. But I would recommend that we reclassify the things that we have as technical back to not be to general, and then the technical items that NASBA considers technical, that we adopt those as technical as well. So I think as it's written here, I would make the motion that we make the changes that have been noted.
I can make a strong argument that management of an accounting practice in the topics that are included in doing that could be technical. I mean, I look at my own practice and the things that I've learned from managing it, because it's just another business. And I use that all the time looking at clients. They'll say, hey, how do y'all do this? How do y'all do that? And honestly, that's probably one of the most active test sites, for lack of a better term, where I learned my knowledge of running a business. I mean, what other businesses do y'all run besides an accounting practice? And I draw on that knowledge as technical knowledge for me, helping my clients do things. I mean, I've used numerous practices, that we use for them, and they've adopted some of those things. Obviously, they haven't adopted our CPE practice because some of that's. But I don't know that. I really think we need to be cautious about that, because I mean, number one, if you don't run a good accounting practice, it's kind of hard to be a good technician. I mean, but I think that the practices that you use in the accounting practice are relevant to our clients.
Yeah, I tried to do a little research on what distinguishes between the two, and the thing that I kept finding most often was technical relates to a subject that has definite guidelines, definite rules, definite procedures, definite standards. Management and other is more, here's the way it ought to be done, but there's broad ranges of how to do it.
I like the tax code.
Well, I'm just telling you what I found.
I know.
So in this case, there are different philosophies on how to bill, different philosophies on how to collect AR and succession planning, and so there's not a definite list of procedures or standards to follow.
But I go back to tax. There's no standard way to
There's
do
the
tax return other than you throw the numbers in and try to get it accurate. Collections, I try to bill as much as what I can when I'm supposed to, and I collect it the best I can. I mean,
but that's not technical. I think that's the distinction. But it's not there's not a technical standard to follow in doing that. You just
I bill a pretty good amount in my practice.
I'm not evaluating how you.
I'm just saying, and I would be shocked if other people don't, of where clients come in and they need help, technical help on how to do these same things.
If you do it for a client, it is technical.
But I'm learning a technical skill that I can apply to my clients. It's like my guinea pig is my firm, and that's where my hands-on experience, what are you looking for? Like, it's almost a hands-on experience.
But I think the difference is you are doing that, but not everyone is running the practice. Would that not be?
Every one of my partners bill. Every one of my partners are involved somewhat in collections.
But not all CPAs are partners, are they? I mean, there are a lot of people that don't touch the
I just think we're just chopping it off, saying no, it's not, and I'm arguing that it can be.
But I think, like I said a while ago, there's not standards to go by. There's not technical rules. There's no textbook that says here's how you should bill, here's how you should collect, other than in a general way, not necessarily related to the CPA profession.
I'd also be concerned, though, that if I'm a practitioner, I need my 40 hours of technical knowledge to meet our standards. I'm going to spend time now wasting it on these other non-technical issues that get me nothing other than a knowledge base. I think this is a very important part of our profession, is running your practice. If you run it in the ground, it's kind of hard to.
I'm not saying you wouldn't get CPE, you just wouldn't get technical.
You don't have to now. I mean, that's not. There's no benefit CPE-wise to getting that kind of CPE.
Map CPE just to get the credit, so.
Take it because it's both. I mean, when I'm taking CPE, I've got to have A&A hours as well, so it's efficient for me to do.
Everybody else, how do you feel about this?
I'm when it talks about management advisory services is included in the technical 40 hours, most of these can fall under the management advisory services. You know, if I'm working with a client that's a law firm and they have questions about bill, I mean, it's all, it can all be technical.
Like I said a while ago, if you're doing it for a client, it would count as technical. It's just if you're doing it for your own. That's the distinction that NASBA has right now. We wouldn't have to adopt that. We could be different, but.
I guess that's my point. I don't agree with that, with their assessment of that.
You think it all should be technical or all should be management? Which way would you go?
I think that a lot of these items that we have classified as technical should remain technical.
I'm still not terribly comfortable with how we're defining technical, because you used the word relevant, that managing your practice is very relevant to your practice, but so would be the area of business ethics or studying management. Those are very relevant. I would like for us to focus a little bit more on the definition of what is technical. I heard what you said, but do other people define it differently?
This relevant rule that's shown here at the top, that's Tennessee's rule, right?
Right, that's Tennessee's rule, and if you want to go a direction you don't feel like either of these items fit in that rule, we could, of course, do a rule change. We could also create a policy that helped define management advisory a little better, if that would be helpful. But yeah, this is the rule that we have in place to define the 40-hour technical requirement. And so what we're attempting to do is to see if those items in the first section that NASBA considers technical, would you all interpret that to fall under our technical definition or not? And then those items in the second category, at some point, this group has already considered to fall into that category. And so do you want to leave those as is, or do you want to now say that those do not qualify under this particular definition?
I think the first set, for sure, should be considered technical. I mean, I think Stephen's made a good argument on the things that we already consider technical, and I can see where I can see the thought process now that Stephen's made that made us aware of.
But I could apply that same thought process to studying management, right? I mean,
Yeah.
He's saying it helps him in helping his clients. So I'm not comfortable with that. And also, I guess I really don't understand in the rule why, for example, well, I guess accounting ethics, we have behavioral ethics. I mean, there just seem to be some fuzzy things. And so I'm trying to get us to think about where are the lines and where are we drawing them.
If you break it down and use it becomes technical if it's used for clients. You're going to tell an educator when they go take tax CPE that guess what, you don't print tax returns for clients. You're just using it for your own personal use to help you teach people. Same thing.
And, see, I haven't thought of technical as that way, but so that's what I'm grappling with. I've thought of it more like Larry had said, where there's a specific set of rules, et cetera. Accounting ethics, that would be true if we're talking about the ethics under the rules that we have to follow for our profession. But the broad area of ethics, perhaps not.
Well, I guess one approach we could take is if we agree on the top section that it all should be technical and we're really not sure about the bottom, and I guess we could either take a vote on each one individually, or if there's not a strong enough argument to change the ones at the bottom, we could leave those as is, if that's what we want to do. Comments, I guess I would entertain a motion to do one of those two things.
Larry, may I make one more comment? On the second section, I had left off marketing. So just to add to the discussion, marketing has previously been determined to be a technical subject in Tennessee, and it is not considered technical by NASBA. So that they had that question for us, because what they do is they take our decisions and they build them into the CPE tracker, so that when folks load their certificates, then the system knows how to code them for our state, because every state's different.
Behavioral ethics, is that broad, as Pam was just saying, or is that specific to the industry?
This is what we have on my spreadsheet. This is all I've got. So I don't have much else to go on.
When you throw marketing in there, and then based on what Pam said, I mean, marketing, I just don't see how that could possibly be technical.
I wonder if in the rule, I don't know how long this has been on the book, well, I guess maybe '05, but accounting ethics, decades ago, we had the Code of Professional Ethics, and then it went to the Code of Professional Conduct. And so, I mean, that is a set of rules put out by the profession. And maybe this was a distinction from that behavioral ethics were more of the gray areas one encounters in business. I don't know.
Yeah, that's one question. That's probably a valid question. Is there another category of ethics that we do have up in the technical, are there more? Is there more than one category of ethics in several spots in our list? Maybe behavioral ethics is just what it was called at the time this was put in place. Other category B, non-behavioral.
Regulatory.
Unethics.
Regulatory
We see it listed
Practices.
as regulatory ethics, which would be more code of conduct, law and rule type.
So NASBA has it as, I'm sorry,
So our rule lists accounting ethics as acceptable. Somewhere along the line, we have also accepted this behavioral ethics, where NASBA separates them.
Okay.
There is this code of conduct type regulatory ethics, and then there's just general.
okay, so that is, I think, more of a general type of ethic.
In the past, though, anything ethics we have accepted as a technical, regardless of what type of ethics it is. We have
Liberal ethics would count.
in the past, that's
Okay.
what we have done. Any type of ethics, we have not separated
I
them.
think that's smart. I think when we get into having different categories of ethics, it's going to be tough to distinguish. So I think all ethics ought to be one place or the other and not have categories.
I'd always heard the reason ethics was technical, and this may be completely wrong, but it's kind of how they started packaging it. You'd have a 6-hour A&A session and then 2 hours of ethics, and it kind of screws up your hours when you got, now I've only got 6, and then I take a couple 8 hours to get my 40, and now I've got to go find a 2-hour technical class. I don't know if that's true or not, but I'd heard that somewhere along the way. Or maybe there was somebody just...
Well, there are definite guidelines and rules on ethics as opposed to some of these other categories, so I think part of it too.
Well, I think we're all in agreement on the first section. So I'll make the motion that we adopt the subjects that NASBA consider technical that we currently do not consider technical, that we adopt those. I make that motion.
Second that.
All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Second category. Do I hear a motion on that?
I think these are just more general in nature, and overall, unless we're going to take each item individually, especially you add marketing in there.
Yeah, okay, so one thing we need to address is, do we want to have more than one category of ethics? So, have another ethics category that is up here in the other section, and then this one's down here, so.
But for us, aren't they both technical?
Right, so in the past, we have accepted any ethics courses as a technical subject. And so, but NASBA has broken them into two different types of ethics, either specifically regulatory versus general. So the decision would be to stay the course or to separate them in some fashion.
What are the implications, Wendy, of our differing from NASBA, practically speaking?
I think, I see it as though even though we've accepted certain things in the past in certain ways, we've never publicized this information. So we accept any NASBA-approved provider as an acceptable sponsor. And so if someone sees their document out there claiming what's technical and what's not, and then we differ from that, it could be confusing. I have yet to see an example of that where it's harmed somebody. So I can't say it's a real problem, but I foresee it could be a problem.
But it would be less of a problem if we deem it as technical and NASBA
Correct.
does not.
That's only benefiting the licensee.
That's probably why it has not come up.
Yeah.
Do you think we need to understand the ramifications? Because, as Stephen said, I think this would have a large impact on people who have been doing it this way. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't change it, but I do think we need to realize what a big action I think this would be.
And I think we don't have to take any action on the second block. We've already discussed the first block and made a recommendation for tomorrow on that. We don't have to address the second block if the committee is fine the way it is, and then the board.
I would just notify NASBA of the change so that the tracker is built correctly. And
Let me ask a question. If someone were to submit one of these courses as technical, and let's say we changed it, and they submitted it, and they've been able to do that in the past, is there a way they could, challenge it, come before the board, and we could approve or disapprove if they tell us how it's?
I do, yeah, there is I think the last section of that rule states that the board has ultimate authority to approve any CPE claimed under this rule. So I think that gives you broad ability to, if we were unclear on something and we brought it to you. And
In that case, I would recommend that we not consider these technical, and if someone wants to come before us and argue that it is technical in nature for them, then we can make those exceptions. I don't.
Wouldn't managing a practice be relevant to anyone who manages a practice? We might have a lot of petitions, I would think.
I may be here arguing, on that side. I'll give you marketing. I think that's not something that's relevant to our industry. But again, I'll go back, and I'm simply using NASBA's dividing line between what they consider technical and not. And honestly, if we do this, we're going to have to tell every educator in the state that's not a practitioner that none of your CPE counts as technical because you're not providing it for a client. You're teaching.
Why don't we address each one of these individually? Casey, did you have a comment?
I'm not on this committee, but I would like to make a couple of comments before y'all move on. I guess I'm of the opinion that NASBA puts a lot of thought, probably a lot more thought into how they classify these things than we do, because they have more time and more resources to do that process. And I think we ought to line up with NASBA unless we have a really good reason not to. And that's my first comment. The second one is this last category, and I served as managing partner of a CPA firm here in Tennessee, a large local firm, for about 10 years, and went to a lot of management of accounting practice stuff and things that would qualify in this last category for CPE. I don't think that ought to be technical. I mean, when you look at the technical requirement, to me that ought to be something hardcore like a FASB update, statements on auditing standards update, tax update, RISA changes, PCAOB study, and so I have a hard time fitting any of these items in this last category into that technical slot. I just, behavioral ethics, I've been to some of that, and man, that's all over the place. I mean, you know, it depends on your instructor and what slant they want to take, whereas if it's rule-based ethics, you got something to look at.
That's what I was trying to head a while ago. In some of these areas, there's
I don't wish to get in a controversy with Stephen. I'd tell him on the opposite side of the fence from him on this, but
you're on the upside and dying.
I just want to offer those comments, and I'll shut up. And
agree with that. In Upper East Tennessee, there's more than one way to skin a cat on how to run a firm.
Yeah.
But some of these other areas, there's not.
Yeah.
What's the difference in these topics and personal financial planning? How does personal financial planning have anything to do with accounting? That's more investments. It's the same thing as succession planning, professional liability insurance. Those two things are, in my opinion, very similar. PCI compliance. I mean, that's more IT related. I mean, that's not really accounting.
Financial planning would have investments and those kinds of things which are technical. But
not technical to account. I mean, but it's not time and billing and collections. I mean, how to actually bill client. That's the engine that runs a client's business. We don't give clients. Nobody here bills a client for providing collections advice and accounts receivable advice and time of billing and stuff.
That's distinguished as technical if it's for a client.
But I'm just saying, I do that for a client. So I mean, can I not come here and argue and say, well, I took this administration of accounting practice that had time and billing and collections, but I consider it to be a good resource for me to learn technical knowledge for my clients to bill.
I have a hard time separating it, because so much of what we learn in business management and organization, it is a part of us helping our small business clients. And I mean, how do I say, I spent 2 out of that 8 hours, that should be technical because I'm applying it to a client. I'm having a hard time separating the two, because I still think even if it's just running our business, there are rules and regulations that we have to follow, and to make sure that you're following even ERISA or HIPAA within your own practice. And so some of that business management and organization are going to cover some of those topics, and it still seems like it's technical.
Take ACA. I learned that most of that for clients going through all the pain and suffering we did for our own practices. You know, and honestly, with all due respect, Casey, I guess my point would be, NASBA may have a lot of time to think about it, but they don't practice it. In theory, they don't own they're not a firm. They don't do what we do. They just sit and hypothesize about what we potentially do, and no offense to them, but I mean, there's a difference. It's like a football analyst up there trying to act like he's a coach. I mean, there's a big difference. Same thing, or me playing money-winning quarterback. Why do they do that? I mean, I mean, I'm not disrespecting NASBA. I'm just saying I think there's a difference that we live this, and this is something we do on a daily basis.
This category, administration of a public accounting practice, that particular one, I don't think you're advising other CPA firms. you'd be advising clients that are general clients. They're not other CPA firms, right?
But it doesn't matter. Collections is collections, is collections.
But that, I mean, the course is administration of public accounting practice, and
It's the course, it's the topic, it's the area of topic. I mean, I've learned a lot.
I think it's obvious that we
At
have
odds.
a little bit of a stalemate here. So if someone wants to make a motion one way or the other, I think we have a motion on the floor on the top category of changing those to be,
we've already completed that.
I guess maybe we should just vote on that and then. Well, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Hey, I did make that motion, so.
Okay. So does anyone have a motion on the ones at the bottom, or do we move on and let those be different?
I would make the recommendation that we consider them individually, because I think at least a few of them should go away as far as technical goes.
Okay.
And maybe the ones we're at odds on, we can, just
Okay.
let those be.
Then behavioral ethics, did we decide that we're going to throw that into one bucket and put
That's the way it has been.
I thought we weren't, right.
We're considering it technical, all ethics, considering them technical.
Okay, so it would stay here, or,
Right now, we consider all ethics technical, and if you don't make a change, it will continue that way. So
see, I think the general ethic, it could be about behavioral ethics could,
But what Wendy's saying is we don't have a category called behavioral ethics. We just have ethics. So we wouldn't
no, we do. This is our category, right?
Well, no, we count anything as ethics under technical right now. So on my sheet, I have different, it is listed, but we've counted anything as ethics as technical. So the change you'd be making today, if you wanted to, would be to carve out behavioral and say that's no longer going to count as a technical subject. And that would be in line with NASBA if you did that. If
I
not,
agree with that. That's what we need to do.
you would like to carve it out.
I think we should carve out behavioral. It's very broad and general. It's not technical.
Well, how are we going to define it, though?
Use that term, behavioral ethics.
Well, anything other than the professional code of ethics, professional code of conduct.
What you think
We're
we're,
opening Pandora's box. If we're going to have to start interpreting
Yeah.
what a course is, I don't want to do that.
well, NASBA already has it.
Don't they do it
Yeah,
as either professional code of conduct or not?
Here's how NASBA describes behavioral ethics. Subjects related to behavioral ethics include, but are not limited to, ethical decision-making, ethical practice in business, and personal ethics. It is.
Well, then
Well,
okay.
I'll turn, there's a page on regulatory too, so let me find that, and I will read that to you.
Is there anything that we've done in the past based on this list that's harming the industry, harming our industry, harming the public? I don't see any of these topics as being harmful to the public.
That's a very good point.
I mean, I just don't want to see us just making a bunch of changes just because some organization said, well, we sat around and had a long meeting and decided that it would be better classified here. I mean, that's my point.
And like I think Gay had mentioned earlier, we are only benefiting the licensees by keeping one or more of these there. That just goes beyond what NASBA allows.
Marketing, I'll give you that one. If you need one, I'll give it to you. But the rest of them, I can argue.
Well, it sounds like even NASBA accepts anything ethics. I'm not sure why we even have this one on the list.
Now, what I just read to you, NASBA would not consider technical.
Oh, I thought you were reading what they do consider technical.
No, here's what they do under the regulatory side. This is technical. Business transactions with clients, competence, confidential client information, conflict of interest, contingent fees, commissions, discreditable acts, professional standards, independence, integrity, objectivity, licenses and renewals, malpractice, code of conduct, public interest and responsibilities, regulatory oversight, retention of client records, state rules, regulations. So that's basically the code of,
Code of professional conduct.
That makes sense.
It seems to me that if we do want to consider these, that we need that information about what NASBA includes in these divisions, because we're trying to make up these divisions as we go. If we want to consider whether to go with NASBA's classifications, I think we need the detailed.
I think I provided it with the document.
Is it detailed here? I'm
Did I-
sorry.
Is it, yeah.
At the risk of having the licensing committee take up the whole afternoon's meeting, I think we should either vote or decide to adopt NASBA's rules.
I'll make a motion that we ignore theirs except for marketing, and leave them like they are.
I would second that.
All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye.
What we may do, we may end up doing is, if you take the rule, at the end of the rule, you'll see it refers to management advisory services. What we may do is create a policy to help as we go forward, where we would list these specific things that we've talked about and how you all feel about them. So should this come up again, it might be a little bit more clear that these types of things, the specialized knowledge, falls under management advisory according to this board, so that it would help, if I'm not here anymore or whatever, or new board members. And we would just bring that to you at the next meeting.
Okay. So tomorrow we'll.
And that marketing is going to move to non-technical.
I apologize, I didn't realize you were reading from the document you'd give me. I had seen those documents, but I thought yours was more extensive.
Unless there's any further discussion, that concludes the licensing committees.
Thank you. Gabe, your committee?
All right, let's look at the first thing on the agenda for the Enforcement Committee is the status of open complaints. Can somebody run through that for us?
Let's see, I'll put these up here. No.
Are we waiting on somebody to go through that? The status of open complaints?
I'm sorry. Yes, because they took my computer and I have it in front of me. Oh, wait. Okay, here we go. Okay, this is just similar to what you have seen at past board meetings. It gives you a status of complaints opened by month, how many were opened and how many were closed, and what the disposition of those were. And then when you get to the bottom, you will see the main thing is on the right side there. As of April 24th, this is kind of the status of our open complaints and where they sit. And I kind of structured it there so that it goes kind of in order to the best way we can. As they come into the office, we request a response. Then it gets referred to legal after we receive the response. Then the case is reviewed by staff, which is actually legal, and on so forth on down the road there. So I didn't put a total of those number of cases, but I thought what might be interesting for you all to know is that I believe, only have 3 cases that are waiting on our future investigator. So we were very lucky during this downtime to not get too much of a backlog. We were able to send a few cases to our internal team that didn't necessarily need the experience of a CPA. We just needed to gather some information to show some fact. And we were able to push, I think, 3 of those through that way. So I'm pleased with where we stand on these.
A couple quick questions. In February, under the open column, there were 5 unlicensed practice cases. Were those all referrals from various boards? I know we've been getting a lot from
Yes.
the contractors board. Is that what that is?
I don't know for sure with just having this in front of me, but I would say likely. and you will see on the legal report as well, we've received several that way.
And then my other question is under March peer review. I know we're talking about 4, but it seems to be, I don't know, it seems like a higher number relative to the other numbers. Is there a concern there that we're having people pop in and out of peer review that shouldn't be? They're trying to game the system, or is it just a one-off occurrence 4 times?
That kind of refers to these referrals from other regulatory boards. So we're finding kind of a duplicate situation where they may
Okay.
not be licensed appropriately, and they're also not going through peer review. So it's kind of twofold.
Okay. Anybody else have questions on that? Second item on the agenda is the matrix of discipline matrix, which is actually really interesting.
I did not send this to you all in advance because I believe they just finalized it last night, and I did not print it. Is this me? That's your computer. Okay. And it should be on your iPad. I'm going to let Sarah go over this with you all.
Members of the board, this discipline matrix is something I worked with Liz and Matt on. A previous board meeting, it had been requested that we look into the disciplinary history of the board, actions they've taken in the past, and start to look and see if, what are our usual penalties? Are we sticking to those? How consistent are we being? The staff with Wendy really did a wonderful job of pulling a lot of our disciplinary action reports, and Vanessa Huntsman, our paralegal, went a little above and beyond that to give us information about exactly specific breakdowns of how many violations were occurring with different folks and what penalties were being assessed. The honest takeaway from looking at all of that data was that there really wasn't a truly consistent pattern when it came to certain violations. That's not true for every violation. Some of our more cut and dry violations, CPE, peer review, things like that, they tended to be approximately the same, or you could see where the factual differences resulted in a difference. But overall, it actually varied quite wildly from 2014 to present day. And there's, obviously, you've had a lot of changes in attorneys and board members, things like that, that contributed. So, while we weren't 100% sure this is exactly what you wanted, Wendy mentioned to Liz that something like a fee penalty schedule would probably be beneficial to the board so that we can remain consistent despite the changes in more members and in the legal team. So we put together this penalty matrix. This is based heavily off of a penalty matrix that is utilized by the Architects and Engineers Board. I think that this first page especially, obviously, the penalties are different and the violations are accounting violations. However, this is not all of the violations. There are a few that I left off that are, as far as I could tell, we've never assessed something against them, or it's an encompassing violation, such as, violation of a rule, where you would really go to the rule that you violated to get your penalty rather than that gateway. So I wanted to bring this to you. I know there is one concern that Wendy already pointed out, which I think is a good one, and Matt as well, that I had put on here. If you were convicted of a felony, I gave some penalty guidelines, when really that's probably not what this board would typically do. Typically we do a letter of warning or something if it was a violation, a felony that was unrelated, but if it was a felony that was in any way linked to honesty, linked to accounting anyway, that we would probably move for revocation or suspension. So I'm happy to make that modification. I know that typically this board hasn't assessed a $750 penalty, and that's a new column to add. But the way I formatted this was to show, in the case where you have a matter that is mitigated, whether they're self-reporting, hey, I forgot to renew, or things like that, that they would get a lower penalty depending on what the board wanted to do. A normal range where you would have maybe a typical violation, maybe they respond, but there's not really anything significant, or whether you don't want to take that mitigating factor into consideration. And then a third column what I would consider aggravating, where there's other factors at play, other past discipline, the way that they worked with our investigators, et cetera, kind of some of the factors I list on that first page, where you would want to go to the higher level penalty. I think it's also important to know when looking at this matrix that this is per violation, and pursuant to your rules, you can assess this penalty per violation per day of that continued violation. So I know For CPE, peer review rather, we tend to do a $3,000 penalty when it's a one peer review range that we found someone in. That covers $1,000 for each year they should have been enrolled in peer review since they're 3-year review cycles. So this would show $1,000, but you would still have, obviously the authority to assess more than one day of violation. So I just think that it's a good place to start, and at least to keep this consistent. This is a first draft. We did just finish it probably 5 o'clock yesterday. So if there's any things that you would like to adjust, change, we are more than happy to make those.
I appreciate it. I mean, this is better than what I was even envisioning when I was asking last meeting about this. So I appreciate y'all's work on that. It's really helpful. I think that my encouragement would be for the members of the committee and obviously the board members too, to get this and take it and review it before the next meeting, just to kind of get familiar with it. I'm assuming that there's some mirroring between these recommendations and what we're going to talk about in a minute on our legal report this time, but I think this is really, really helpful, and I appreciate you doing that. Appreciate doing that.
I was going to ask, can you furnish this to us by email or something? Because we obviously can't take it with us here.
I will go ahead and adjust that conviction area to make it more reflective of how the board would treat a felony conviction, and then I will.
To you. I mean, one of my constant refrains that I'm sure some of you that have been here for a while know that I think that one of the most important things we do is, for both the profession and the public, is be consistent as regulators, and so I think this is really helpful to us. Any other comments or questions? Or
I'd like to just echo that, this is really great. Really appreciate your work on that. It'd be very helpful.
This goes a long way in helping us because we're just so unsure because we want to be consistent. We don't know what's been done in the past. So.
For newer board members, it's particularly helpful to kind of have that and maybe a little history, so thank you.
I'm just going to ask whose idea it was to do this. I didn't know if I could get some credit or...
I think
It'll be a no.
they'll get all the credit, although the idea, I think, came from Dave.
That was a question, but all the credit goes to them for doing it, because this is way better than what I was even envisioning.
Would you consider doing this for the CPE we're trying to distinguish between?
You really could. I mean, it's always. I love charts, so I'm going to make a chart.
I was envisioning like half a piece of legal paper with like some handwritten, scrawled out notes, and this is much nicer. So thank y'all.
Right.
All right.
Yeah.
Let's move on to the legal report. Review that. You all were provided with this, and you've had it. I'm not going to insult your intelligence and read everything, but I think when we get to some of the there's a few things on here for discussion towards the end, and then just kind of getting into some of the other items it actually may be worthwhile to just read them just for the record, just so that we've deliberated on them. There's 28 total items. Numbers 1 through 7 are recommended by legal counsel as closures. Not going to read those, but just very quick. Number 1 appears to be a dispute over billing. There's claims of tax filings, a certain number of tax filings that need to be resubmitted over a 4 or 5 year period of time, where I believe there was dispute over who was the correct guardian or parent to claim a dependent, and our legal apparently looks like could never find evidence to corroborate that the respondent, who was the firm who prepared these and was responsible for refiling them, failed to refile them timely. What they were able to confirm was that all 5 of the tax returns were in process or under review at the IRS. Any questions about that? Number 2 looks to be a fee or billing dispute, and we don't have jurisdiction over that. Number 3, there was allegations made that individual or firm responsible for filing a tax return had actual knowledge of a forged signature by one of the individuals, but our investigation apparently revealed that there wasn't any evidence for that. The main parties didn't really have a lot of knowledge of it, and one of the parties involved gave information that there had been apparently a messy divorce, and the complainant was a party to that divorce. Any questions on that? Number 4, there's a dispute. This looks like it's a dispute over some information regarding a charity where a complainant wanted some information from a respondent who was apparently in charge or doing some tax work for some charities. The person refused to give that information out, and then the next order of succession, I guess, was that the complainant then filed a complaint alleging, among several things, that the respondent wasn't a CPA, which actually they were, but to do tax services, you don't have to have a CPA license. So it didn't look like there was a lot of evidence of anything we could actually do in our jurisdiction over that action itself. And there was no evidence that the individual was holding themselves out, I guess. Oh, no, I'm sorry, that's a different one. But anyway, any questions over number 4? Number 5, there was an investigation. It looked like someone who had an old office space, had some signage up. They were no longer occupying the office space, and they were actually practicing with a properly licensed firm, but there was an old office space with a sign. So recommended closing that claim. Any questions there on 5? On 6, the claimant says that the respondent took money to perform or prepare and file a tax return, but never actually performed or filed the tax return. We couldn't corroborate that, but in either way, there was no evidence that the person was holding themselves out as a CPA, and the tax service itself is not something under our purview. Any questions? And then number 7, again, this is just a paraphrase of what our legal report says, but tax returns were prepared, filed, and emailed to the claimant or complainant, but also mailed in the mail, paper copies. The paper copies never were received by the complainant. Apparently there's some concerns around privacy there. The person who prepared them, or the firm who prepared them, did not do any type of tracking number on that because it was a low-weight, small document. But they have said that going forward, because of concerns around the privacy of the information, that they'll start using tracking numbers for these types of paper mailings. All right, so any questions about any of these to legal counsel? All right, so I would accept a motion that items number 1 through 7, we as a committee would recommend to the board to accept legal counsel's recommendation on those.
Moved.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and second. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All right. All right, number 8, letter of caution. The respondent, I'm going to try to paraphrase this, deals with SEC issues. The respondent self-reported to the board that they were sanctioned by the SEC and made to take remedial measures due to a violation of the SEC's independence rules when the respondent drafted client financial statements for certain broker-dealer audits between 2010 and 2012. The respondent also received an 18-month probation sentence from the California Board of Accountancy for these acts and paid a civil penalty to California for $8,530. The respondent's office that violated these rules is located in California. So is this a firm? Why is there a Tennessee firm here? Did they at one time practice in Tennessee?
I think it's just a larger national firm, so they have offices kind of all over. So one of the states they're licensed in is Tennessee.
So they are doing work here in Tennessee, but this actual office that had this issue was in California?
That's correct.
Okay. Any questions?
What's the difference between the letter of caution and letter of warning? Or maybe why is this a letter of caution versus a warning?
I've just been told that we generally do letter of cautions when they're disciplined by a different state. I think a letter of cautions may be considered a little bit lower on the totem pole than letter of warning. Letter of warning is a little bit more
disciplined by
severe.
a different state.
Letter of cautions like, hey, might want to pay attention to this, and letter of warnings like, we think you might have done this. Like, we can't exactly prove it, but like letter of warning, usually if we say a letter of warning and then it happens again, we would ramp up the penalties on them because they have a...
With no other questions, I'll entertain a motion to make a recommendation to the board tomorrow that we accept legal counsel's recommendation to close this upon the issue of a letter of caution.
Moved.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, light sign. All right. Number 9. So numbers 9 through 14, the recommendation is to close with a letter of warning, and because they are a little bit different, we'll just paraphrase each of those as we go through. Number 9, the complaint was opened because the respondent was dropped from peer review and had not updated the board. There was a concern the respondent was performing a test work while not enrolled in peer review. Certified mail requesting an update had been returned. After receiving the complaint, respondent produced a completion letter showing a peer review was conducted and completed in August of 2016. The respondent stated he was unaware he was dropped, but produced an email that showed the reviewer informed respondent that he was likely not required to undergo peer review with the current work he was engaged in. Respondent has also filed an exemption form with the board since his work does not require peer review. Respondent notes the mail was returned because the delivery attempts were on weekdays and respondent works on weekends. Therefore, no one was at the office to receive the mail and sign. Respondent states he left the complainant voicemails. Complainant disputes the respondent left her voicemails or that he apologized and complainant provided her phone records as proof. My question on this is, what was the underlying issue?
The underlying issue was just the possibility that they were practicing without a test work. I actually apologize. I think that those last two sentences were transposed from a prior complaint.
Oh, okay.
I apologize for that.
Okay.
So could you specifically state which two sentences you believe are transposed?
Absolutely. Therefore, respondent states he left complainant voicemails. Complainant disputes the respondent left her voicemails or that he apologized. Complainant provided her phone records as proof. Those are related to a different complaint. This one really was a board-opened complaint just on the possibility of someone previously doing a test work no longer being enrolled and then never letting us know that they had ceased doing a test work or filing any sort of.
This one actually provided a peer review report, right?
That's right. So that after he was dropped essentially, or it seems a little fuzzy on whether he dropped or he just didn't continue to be enrolled since it's at the end of his last.
It's like he didn't know he was dropped.
Right. Yeah. I'm not sure. Maybe board staff can talk to that of the exact status. of how he
So
left.
our process is when someone is dropped from peer review, TSCPA notifies us. Typically, when you're dropped, you've not done something you were supposed to do in accordance with the peer review. So we contact the individual. We ask for an explanation, which we did in this situation, but the
The
person.
peer review was approved and accepted by.
But that was
Someone.
unavailable. We couldn't see that information, and we asked for that information, but the person did not respond to the request for
Were
information.
they under the Tennessee system or under the national system, or were they?
They're in the Tennessee system, but for some reason, we weren't able to see that in the public file.
I think it's odd, in my opinion, that we're issuing a letter of warning to someone who actually complied with the process, right?
The letter of warning would be to make yourself available to mail from the board and to respond.
I mean, they submitted the proper documentation for the Tennessee Society.
I think the wording would be for failure to respond.
Right, because they didn't submit that until I had gotten it. It's gone to legal. We've had to open a complaint. I've had to reach out separately. It was a very
Difficult to
delayed
track down, is
response.
what you're saying.
Right.
Okay.
So, yeah.
And for the record, these two sentences that were inadvertently included don't impact your recommendation that's on this report, is that right? So as a result of that, we don't need to make a motion to strike those from the report, because all we're doing is making a recommendation to the board. Okay. Okay. Any other questions?
Just, again, I want to go back to this, is why we couldn't see that on our side, because now we share that information with the society, right?
What we can see is we can see the name of the firm, whether they're enrolled, and we can see when the date of their last peer review was and if they were dropped. So this started because we were informed that the firm was dropped.
Okay.
If a firm,
Even though they had a properly submitted one for August of 16 or whatever that date was.
right, and so we reached out to get more information because TSCPA can't provide us that
Got it.
information.
Okay.
And then we didn't receive, if we had received an acceptable response at that time,
wouldn't have an
we
issue.
never would have opened a complaint.
Okay.
So the letter of warning will relate to keeping your ability to be contacted updated? Is that?
I think it would be failure to respond and to.
But we have a rule that if you're going to change the services that you offer, so in this case, you would no longer be offering test services, you have to update the board of that change.
Any other questions? So I'll entertain a motion to make a recommendation to the broader board tomorrow to accept the legal counsel's recommendation for number 9. Got a motion, is there a second?
Second.
Motion second, any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
So, number 10, the complaint was opened by our staff. The respondent was a CPA licensed individual in Tennessee, but received that through reciprocity after they moved to Tennessee from Mississippi. In 2006, the respondent's Mississippi CPA license was revoked due to the respondent not completing required CPE. On the 2007 renewal form for the Tennessee license, however, the respondent indicated that they had not been subject to disciplinary action by any government or professional agency. Now, we didn't figure this out or find this out until the end of 2016 when the staff discovered the revoked license when researching a CPE question that the respondent had asked them. Upon inquiry, the respondent responded to the complaint and stated that he agreed that he did not complete the CPE in Mississippi because he had moved to Tennessee in 2002, which was 4 years before, or 5 years, 4 years before the issue happened. The respondent states that he forgot about the Mississippi license altogether and did not intend to apply this honestly to on our renewal form. My question has always been, and I think it's been answered like 5 times, and I apologize, but if you get a license based on reciprocity, it seems to me like that's some type of derivative action from the original state's license. So do we not require that license continue in full effect when you have reciprocity?
No, when you get a license in our state through reciprocity, at the end of the day, your license is still independent of that license.
Okay.
You use that license, if I'm like, to get your requirements and some of your education background, things like that, to bring
Gotcha.
it over.
Okay, that's helpful. Any questions on this? Yeah, I'll entertain a motion to make a recommendation to the Board of Legal Counsel's recommendation for number 10. What are the motions or second?
Second.
Motion second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? All right. Number 11, an anonymous complaint was received, and with it submitted an invoice from the respondent's business. The respondent doesn't hold a CPA firm permit and isn't a licensed CPA. However, the business utilizes the term accounting in its name. The respondent executed a sworn affidavit indicating that the respondent was unaware of the violation but swears to modify the business name to remove references to accounting in the future. Any questions?
Note for the record, I believe, Trey, this is the one you'll have to recuse yourself on tomorrow.
I will recuse. I have no idea. I recuse myself, but I will trust.
I'll tell you.
Having notified you of something.
You're not on this committee, though, right?
I'm not on this, but tomorrow I will have to recuse myself.
Okay. And I just realized that we were going individually, we didn't need to, so let's move on to 12 before we vote on 11. So we voted on through 10, so let's just keep going. So number 12, the complaint was received alleging that the respondent had multiple employees with improperly listed titles on their website. The titles used the phrase accountant despite these individuals not being licensed CPAs. Upon receipt of the complaint, the respondent immediately changed the titles of their employees and apologized for the oversight. There's no information to indicate these individuals engaged in any unlicensed activity. Any questions on number 12? Number 13, the respondent was selected for audit for CPE hours for the 2014-15 period. The respondent was found to have completed the 80 required CPE hours but fell short of meeting the required CPE hours in technical subjects, a subject apparently near and dear to our hearts. The respondent was notified of the deficiency and advised they would need to complete 5 penalty hours by March the 6th of 2017. Our staff didn't receive a copy of the completed penalty hours, so a complaint was opened. Subsequent to the opening of the complaint, the respondent provided evidence that she completed 8 penalty hours on December 20th, 2016. Any questions? Number 14, the respondent was selected for a 2014-15 CPE hour audit. The respondent was found to have completed 62 CPE hours, falling short of the requirement. The respondent was notified and advised they would need to complete the hours required in addition to 8 penalty hours by March 29th, 2017. The respondent's administrative assistant sent proof all the hours were completed but wasn't received by our staff until the 31st, so 2 days late. The administrative assistant stated she misread the letter and it was entirely her fault. The assistant forwarded emails that showed the respondent had timely provided the hours to be forwarded to the board. Any questions there? Okay, we had voted individually on 9 and 10, so 11, 12, 13, and 14, I'll entertain a motion to recommend to the board tomorrow to follow the recommendation of legal counsel. We have a motion. Is there a second? We have a motion second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? All right, number 15. All right, so now we're getting into recommended consent orders, and this is for the next 11, 15 through 25. So we'll go through these. Might as well vote on these while we're going, so bear with me for asking the same questions over and over. The Securities and Exchange Commission found respondent to have completed fraudulent financial reports for the company where he worked as the CFO. This fraudulent reporting included overstating asset values in such a way as to create a 5,000% increase in the company's assets, resulting in 982% increase in stock price. Due to these fraudulent financial reports, the SEC found respondent to have violated several actions of the Securities Act and the Exchange Act. Respondent cannot appear or practice before the SEC as an accountant for at least 5 years. Respondent was also ordered to pay $125,000 in civil penalties to the SEC. The recommendation from legal counsel is to revoke the license and to be settled by consent order or formal hearing. Any questions? Number 16, respondent was selected for a 2014-15 period CPE audit and was found to be 2 state-specific ethics short. A notice of deficiency was sent to the respondent, but the respondent has not responded to our staff or provided any additional information. The recommendation for legal counsel is for a formal hearing for the maximum penalty with authority to settle via consent order upon the respondent's payment of $1,000 and enrollment in a CPE audit for next reporting period. Any questions? Number 17, the respondent was dropped from the TSCPA peer review in 2017. Per TSCPA, the last peer review completed was in 2012. According to the respondent, on peer review renewal, respondent indicated it continued to provide audit services through 2015. Respondent admitted to dropping peer review, but thought since completed in 2012 they would be covered through 2015. Respondent admitted to performing audits through 2015. No evidence indicating the respondent has completed audits after 2015. The respondent has not enrolled in peer review as of the typing of this report. So the recommendation of legal counsel is a formal hearing for the maximum penalty with authority to settle via consent order upon the respondent's payment of $3,000. It can be settled through consent order or formal hearing. Any questions on this?
I just had one question to clarify the facts as I read them. So from what I understood, they did a peer review in 2012, and then they continued to do audit services or services that would require continued peer review going forward. And in essence, they dropped that in 2015, thinking that they were covered for that period, and then after 2015, they did not provide services that would have been subject to peer review. Is that kind of the correct understanding?
Any other questions? I accept a motion to recommend to the board tomorrow to accept legal counsel's recommendation on 17.
And we did not vote on 15 and 16 either.
I'm screwing this up, man. I'm sorry. Thank you for telling me that. All right, we'll just, I guess, do we have to do it individually, or can we wait and do them as a group for the consent orders as long as we don't change anything? All right. Thanks for keeping me honest. I appreciate that. That's good. All right. Number 18, the respondent is not a licensed CPA. However, the respondent was found providing a test services on a Tennessee Contractors Board application. The Contractors Board submitted the complaint to the Tennessee Accounting Board. The respondent admits to being unlicensed but maintains that the services she provided were not audits but just a review of their client's financials and standard bookkeeping services. No evidence to indicate respondent advertised the test services or represented themselves as a CPA firm exists. A review of the relevant statutes shows that the acts undertaken by respondent do classify as test services. The recommendation here is for a formal hearing for the maximum penalty with authority to settle via consent order upon the respondent's payment of $1,000. Any questions on this? All right.
I have a question. I'm not on the committee, but this is an unlicensed situation. I think there's another one or two later where we're going to assess a penalty of $1,000, but there are some other situations where the penalty is $3,000, $4,000, and those are we're licensed CPAs, maybe where the permit expired. Just somewhere we need to. I would like to understand better the monetary penalty.
I think 21 is the one I see that seems like, from what I can tell from the report, the facts are the same, but one is saying that it's a review report and the person doesn't think it. The other one is you prepared a review report but didn't enroll in peer review first. So is there a difference in the facts we're not seeing?
Yes. So you're going to see a lot of these that are similar. And the two fact patterns we're seeing from the reviews for the Board of Contractors are people who are entirely unlicensed, not a CPA, don't work for a firm. Typically, some of them are tax service individuals that have performed a financial review. And in that case, the penalty, and we'll start in the future, we'll start putting what statute and rule, I think, here. I think it'll be easier. In that case, the only penalty I can hit them for is 1 count of unlicensed activity, because they, by not having a firm permit or a CPA license, they are not subject to the rest of our requirements. The other ones with $3,000, those are all licensed CPAs, and therefore they're not unlicensed when they perform that review work. They are people who are not either in a firm or subject to peer review. And so in those cases, it's kind of a hard choice if we hit them for being unlicensed in the fact that they don't have a firm permit despite being a CPA, or do we say, regardless, you should have been under peer review. And I think the route that we chose was to say you should have been subject to peer review, rather than saying not having a firm permit is somehow an approximation to being unlicensed, because in our minds, by becoming a CPA, you've subjected yourself to all the requirements of the rules and those statutes, and therefore you know you can't do a test work without peer review, and separated that really from the firm permit. In some of these cases, we're not even sure what the firm that they would have been with is, so we're not quite sure if they would have been, if that firm is licensed but not doing a test services, things like that. So that's the difference, $1,000 for unlicensed folks, $3,000 for people who are licensed.
I'd also put on number 18, that's basically $1,000 for each attest service they provided. I suppose number 21, there could be dozens, hundreds of attests they might have done, so it's actually a much less penalty, I think.
The $1,000 for the unlicensed firm, is that per day? Can you assess that per day, or is that the absolute maximum? Because it seems like we're being less harsh with those people than we are with the people that have licensed. Maybe they didn't do peer review or whatever, but to me, they're both the same offense. You've done something that really you shouldn't have done.
Have the authority to assess a penalty per day. Where we run into an issue, and when we go to a hearing, it's going to be difficult for us to show how many days did you work on this attest, like this document, and can we justify each day of penalty. And so typically with unlicensed activities across the different programs, they do 1 violation of unlicensed activity or a per service violation. So if, say we had an unlicensed individual and we know that they did 4 attest projects, we would hit them for $4,000, $1,000 per attest. We could obviously send out an investigator and start to get working papers and try to determine about how long did this take you, so that we can justify that $1,000 per day penalty. But it's difficult in some way, but you do have that authority absolutely to do that.
One distinction, I think, that being a public member that I think is important is that someone with a license should know the rules, and someone without a license may not know the rules. So you've got 2 situations there, and I think that was easy.
They would make to the judge.
Yeah, I do too. I think we would get in a lot of hot water.
The judge would likely be sympathetic to that argument as well.
In number 18, the respondent admits to being unlicensed, but maintains that the services she provides were not audits, but just a review of their clients' financials and standard bookkeeping services. Would the consent order, have some affirmation that she will cease and desist from doing this type of work, because she doesn't seem to appear to be in agreement that she can't do it?
Right. I believe our form consent order always contains a cease and desist block, and then we'll also quote the rule where it specifically says in the statute a financial review. It's verbatim, and so we'll.
And if we see this person's name again, we have their disciplinary history, so on that occasion, we'd probably send out an investigator and really do some more digging to see if they've done any other attest services. And then if we were to go to a judge, we could say, like, they've already signed a consent order, they already know this was wrong, and they're still continuing to do it. And that probably does give us a better argument to go after $1,000 per day of violation.
So for these cases that are referred to us by the contractors board, do they accept the reviewed statements for the contractors and issue the licenses?
No, they have not been.
Okay. What about the ones who are licensed but just aren't in peer review? Do they even know about peer review, the contractors board?
They do because they have a CPA that's reviewing this information.
So they don't let the contractors get their license when they use a non-attest, non-peer review enrolled accountant to provide the, because I think there's 3 tiers of contractor license, or at least for residential. And so you have to show you have $10,000 or $50,000 or whatever it is to get the different levels. So you're saying that if I go in to do that and I don't use one, I don't get my license? Or do they give the license and then just on the back end report it to us for us to take action?
They typically check with us to see if they're licensed to perform that work. So when you submit a firm application, you have to submit your 2 years of experience performing or preparing or reporting on financial statements. And so he looks at it in terms of, are you licensed to do this or are you not?
We don't have to, I guess my question is, we don't have to worry about this cottage industry of people who don't care about our stuff and are just sending in reviewed reports for contractors and they're getting their licenses and then they're just going to thwart or ignore us, right? Because if I do it once, my client's not going to get the license and I'm not going to have anybody else I can provide information to.
I would say no, because they're getting their license rejected, but in addition to this, in fact, one of these complaints, I wanted more information, and Vanessa actually had the great idea of, instead of sending an investigator, why don't you just call the contractor? And the contractor, I spoke to their office manager, was extremely frustrated, because they did have to pay to have another one of these done again, and provided all the information that I asked for as far as working papers and timelines. And so I think, if anything, the frustration is causing them to assist us, which could be, I think, is a benefit to the board in the future.
Questions on 18?
I just have one question. Just so on number 18, was this just financial statements without any type of compilation or review report or audit report?
As Sarah kind of mentioned, our statutes state a financial review classifies as an attest service, which is basically verbatim what she claimed she was doing and should have been exempted for.
Janet, they're actually creating reports. Most of the times the wording's not correct, but it'll be very similar to what a review report looks like. So they are attempting to provide a report.
Okay, so it did have some type of report attached to the...
I think everyone he's brought me has had a report.
Okay.
Does the application itself require audited, or what does the application require for the financial statements?
Depends on the level of
the
bonding that they're looking, or not the bonding, the level of the license that they're looking for, monetary limits.
Okay.
It's unlimited, it requires an audit.
Oh, okay.
You can actually get by with just a
Compilation.
Well, you can actually get by with filling out a financial statement.
Okay, that's what I was wondering. We're not talking about those. Okay.
And filling in the numbers.
So we're not talking about those. We're talking about ones that require this higher level. Okay.
Correct.
Well, if they issued a compilation review or audit and were not enrolled or whatever, that would be a problem, period.
Okay, any other questions on 18? Number 19, respondent was selected for a 2014-15 CPE audit. The respondent failed to provide certificates to verify attendance and completion of the CPE courses he claimed. A notice of the deficiency was sent to the respondent, and the respondent replied stating he has attempted to secure the certificates but was unsuccessful. The respondent has requested to be allowed to complete 45 additional CPE hours by the end of 2017. Recommendation from legal counsel is that formal hearing for the maximum penalty with authority to settle via consent order upon the respondent's payment of $1,000 and the completion of 112 additional CPE hours by the end of 2017. The 112 hours may be reduced hour by hour or hour for hour by respondent by submitting proof of his attendance in the 2014 to 15 time periods. How do we get to 112 hours?
It's the 80 hours he was supposed to have, but couldn't prove that he had done any of those 80 hours, and then I think 32 penalty hours.
It looked like he just said he only had 45 hours he couldn't prove.
reported that he only did 45 hours, so even with that, he would have been 35 hours short. So that's why he asked to do 45. He basically asked to do his hours plus 10 penalty hours, but at the end of the day, he couldn't prove that he had done any CPE hours. So that's why I recommended 112 being the 80 he was supposed to do in 14-15, plus 32 penalty hours, plus what he should be completing this year.
And what was the 32 penalty hours based on?
It's 8 hours per benchmark that you miss. So if you don't do your 80 hours, it's 8 hours. No ethics, it's 8 hours. If you miss your technical requirement, it's 8 hours. If you miss your 20 per reporting period, it's 8 hours.
That's set out in the rules? Okay. Any questions? Okay, number 20, the respondent's firm permit expired December 31, 2015. Respondent withdrew from peer review on October 27, 2016. Respondent's last review period covered January 1, 2012 to December 21, 2012. Despite this, respondent conducted an audit and a compilation in 2016. Respondent self-reported the above events in an effort to end the firm in good standing with this board. Respondent stated respondent inadvertently allowed the permit to lapse due to a separation and subsequent divorce. As a result of personal issues, respondent was not fully active in practice and sought to close the firm. As for compilation and audit, respondent states the engagements were small in scale and for a business in which respondent previously conducted similar work while under peer review. Respondent is attempting to close the firm and has notified clients of the discontinuance of services. Respondent works full-time elsewhere and maintains a CPA license. The recommendation is for a formal hearing for the maximum penalty with authority to settle via consent order upon respondent's payment of a civil penalty in the amount of $3,000 for failure to be enrolled in peer review. Any questions?
Now, how did we get to the $3,000 here, just for clarification?
It would be, he did one, he did the compilation and the audit service in 1 year, and therefore would have been required to be covered by a peer review. That would have been a 3-year review cycle. $1,000 per year he should have been enrolled in peer review.
Wendy's done some research. One of the things we're concerned about is that we don't want the penalty to be less than the cost of peer review. So I think we figured out that $3,000 was sufficiently above the cost of a peer review to make it not worth their time to try to skip a peer review.
Right.
Other questions? Okay, number 21, the Tennessee State Board for Licensing Contractors referred this complaint to the board. It's similar to the one we looked at, I believe, on, was it 18? Yeah, except this one is the issue that I believe legal counsel just talked about, where this was actually a licensee who wasn't enrolled in peer review, and so I just lost my page, and so it's a $3,000 penalty instead of a $1,000 penalty. We've kind of already talked about it. Any other questions on that? All right, number 22, this is similar more, I guess, to 18, where you've got the same issue, where there was a review report for a client provided to the licensing contractors board, but the person preparing it didn't hold a CPA license or a firm permit. So the recommendation is for a formal hearing for maximum penalty to settle via consent order upon respondent's payment of a civil penalty amount of $1,000. Again, same issue we just talked about. Any questions there? Number 23, this is a contractor's licensing board issue, but looks to be a little bit different. So the respondent prepared a review report for a client while holding an expired firm permit and failing to be enrolled in peer review. The respondent responded to the complaint and stated the expired permit was an oversight, and the respondent claims to be working to get enrolled in peer review. So the recommendation is a little bit different. Formal hearing for the maximum penalty with authority to settle via consent order upon respondent's payment of a penalty in the amount of $4,000 for failing to be enrolled in peer review and offering to test services while operating on an expired firm permit. Can you just go through for the record what the $4,000 number consists of?
Yes, it would be $3,000 for not being enrolled in peer review and $1,000 for operating on the expired firm permit.
Any questions? No? All right, number 24, different agency, the Health Services and Development Agency, referred this complaint to the board. The respondent prepared audited financial statements and an audit report for a client, but respondent does not have a CPA license or a firm permit. Here, the recommendation is for formal hearing for the maximum penalty with the authority to settle via consent order upon respondent's payment of a civil penalty in the amount of $1,000 for unlicensed activity. So I have a question on this one. It's one thing, in my opinion, and I'm not probably a lot of people say I'm not a reasonable person, but my belief is that reasonably it's one thing to give somebody an audit, a review report. It's a totally different thing to prepare an audit report. It seems to me like there's a different level of knowledge and intent there, and so I would be open to higher than $1,000 penalty.
I would agree with that, and, the financial statements and reports we've seen from the Contractors Board are two-page documents, fairly simplistic. This was actually part of a certificate of need, so a very important document. Usually a lot of money on the line for a lot of different people and communities. This person, I've done some research. Very hard to locate. The firm name that was used doesn't seem to truly exist. I have been able to locate the individual that seems to operate a bookkeeping and tax services business on and off. And so I do believe there's at least enough evidence that I have found to show a level of knowledge that would be sufficient to raise this $1,000 penalty to a judge.
So, only because when you said something that occurred, is it similar that THSDA, I probably should know this, doesn't issue the CON if they find an issue like this?
I am not sure, to be honest with you, what they did in this case with the certificate of need.
Do we know if there's any harm to the entity applying for it because of this?
I don't believe they accepted it, but I don't know anything in addition to that.
Okay, so for the record then, I'm going to, out of a complete abundance of caution, recuse myself from voting on this. Does that mean I can't even introduce it for the motions? Do I need to hand it over to somebody else to do that? Just because we probably pay whoever it is that was doing this.
To have your co-chair or your
Mr. Monroe, would you mind taking over this one?
Yes. No, I don't mind, Gabe. Sorry. So with respect to this one, we've kind of discussed this. I think what we should do is have a motion and a second, and then if there's discussion on the amount of the fine and we need to amend that motion, we can do so. But would seek a motion to accept the recommendation as written and prepared presently for this one.
I make a motion that it be increased, and I'm open to what that should be.
Okay, if you make a motion and maybe would like to state a dollar amount, then we can have a second and have a discussion.
I think Sarah's probably a better...
It is challenging. I'm willing to say that obviously with the extensive nature of producing an audit for any sort of healthcare provider to show a need, you're going to have at least, obviously I would defer to you all as far as what you would think it would take to do that, but in minimum I would say $3,000 minimum. I think it's easy to show that it would take at least 3 days of continued work to produce this report, and it is a quite extensive portion of the certificate of need. And so I would be comfortable with that moving forward.
And there seems to be some intent involved
Right,
with this.
right.
So,
I agree.
malicious intent, or
at least a blatant
malicious.
disregard
Yeah,
for what is
yeah.
required at a minimum.
So,
And I would say that it likely did have some impact on the certificate of need, and so there's at least a harm.
there was a harm to the public for to their client, and it could have gone through and been. It could have caused a lot of problems. So.
Absolutely, and I can reach out to the Health Services and Development Agency in an effort to collect additional evidence, perhaps working papers and things like that, to back up at least 3,000. But I would be comfortable going to 5 even.
I make a motion that we stop this person with a $5,000 penalty.
Okay, we have a motion to accept the recommendation, which was originally stated at $1,000, and to modify that to be a $5,000 penalty for unlicensed activity. Is there a second?
Is there any, I guess, maybe you can find some history on us distinguishing between audit versus review and charging more if it's an audit, or just to be consistent?
Right. We recently did poll all the disciplinary history, and in some of them we could note what kind of work, but ultimately, most of those disciplinary actions get couched as a test services, and so it is difficult to distinguish. I am willing to say that at a hearing it would make a difference as far as the extent of work that goes into it and the level of expertise that would be required to do something like this, where even without the history, we would feel comfortable, I think, it's not to speak for Matt, to go in front of a judge and make an argument that this is a more elevated level of a test services. Additionally, Matt made a good point I wanted to bring to the board is our investigator will soon be starting with us, and we are happy to, even though we've already approved a penalty, we can move forward to work with this individual. We're happy to also follow this up with an investigation where we'll send them to hopefully maybe to locate this person and try to get more proof and perhaps represent it for a higher penalty if needed, if even beyond what you've recommended here in this motion.
One thing I think we should consider, though, being careful about if both review and audit is in violation of our rules. I don't want to encourage people to be more prone to do a review if they're going to do one or the other because they get a less penalty. They're both equally they're both equal violations. To say that the audit is a worse violation, maybe, but they're not supposed to be doing either one of them. You don't want to encourage them to go with the lesser level of service just to avoid the higher penalty. Comment.
I would ask, is there a second to the motion on the 5,000, on the recommendation with the $5,000 penalty? We have a motion from Judy. Is there a second?
Like the second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion on this recommendation? I have one comment. I'm not too comfortable with the notion of approving a penalty for this offense and then coming back later if we find more, evidence that says it was even a worse offense than we thought, and trying to bring them up again. So, if we're comfortable that we have enough facts to support the recommendation, that's fine. But I don't think I would be comfortable coming back and putting that same offense before the board again here. So,
Well, should we couch that and let our investigator do some work and then bring this, or is the time of the essence here? Or
I think that Sarah feels confident we have information to prove a violation. So, we might find some more information, but I don't know how helpful.
Yes, and honestly, at the end of the day, if we end up finding through investigations that this is a more egregious action and they don't accept the consent order, because this is the scenario where I don't represent it. If I don't represent it, they don't accept the consent order, I go to a hearing and I put all that evidence on anyway, and I rack up as high of the civil penalty as I can reasonably say and allow the judge to bring it down to what she believes or he believes to be reasonable. The other way around is I come back with my evidence and then you increase your settlement offer to prevent the need to go to the hearing. That would be really the distinction. At the end of the day, I'm still going to go to the hearing and ask for the most that I possibly can based on what I have at that time.
Is it relevant for us to ask what this person charged for the service?
I do not know that information.
So in other words, if somebody can charge $10,000 for an audit and pay a $3,000 penalty, I mean.
Right, and one of the
That can only happen so many times because at some point we're going to revoke the license.
If they get caught.
If they get caught, but.
well, or they may not have a license, I think.
Well, they don't have one anyway, so what difference does it make?
I guess I'm just saying we need to not make it profitable to violate the rules.
Mr. Chairman.
Sarah, this is an authority to settle, and if you find extenuating circumstances, you're not going to offer the settlement once you do the investigation to start with. So I think that would take care of the question on the floor at this point that, may find something else. Well, you're not going to offer this settlement. We've given you the authority if the facts are what they are, but you're not going to offer it if it's more egregious or something else comes up to start with.
Well, I will say this, the way that you are correct if it goes past, so what happens after we leave here is that these consent orders based on the recommendations are produced and sent within the week. So it is possible that before I have initiated my investigator, because I have to send that consent order in order for us to be compliant with our metric and stop the clock on these actions, especially because I have probable cause of at least one instance of unlicensed activity. It is possible this consent order gets to the addresses I have for this individual, and she chooses to sign it and send it with her money, and it's finished. At that point, now I can still investigate it and open an additional complaint. So at the end of the day, it really is, you know, whether we want to, because if I end up sending out an investigator anyway, if we do believe there's something going on, we can open a complaint and send an investigator, or we don't have to accept the consent order. At the end of the day, the consent order has language in it that says at the end of the day, the board can still say they do not want to accept it. So we can, at that point, I can bring it back to the next meeting too with my additional evidence and say, hey, if she does sign it, I have the consent order, do you still want to accept it? And you can say no, that we do not. There's lots. I say all that to say there are lots of options and many different routes we can take to check individuals like this that are doing this kind of level of work kind of under the radar. Difficulty in this person maybe even just finding them, unfortunately, but we're going to do our best, absolutely.
Appreciate that clarifying question and also the response. Is there any further discussion on the motion on the floor?
I apologize, but Matt wanted me to add this. I think it's another good option, is you could also authorize this just to go straight to a hearing with no opportunity to settle. That is another option.
If I was just uncomfortable with where do we get this 5,000 or 3,000? Is it just out of the air? Is it based on something? So if you can just clarify, what is the penalty based on?
Sure, and the way that I presented that was making what I think is a reasonable inference of how long it would take to produce an audit report for a hospital. That at minimum, I can assess a penalty per day of continued activity, and I think it's, at this point, considering the extent of the audit and the work that was produced, it would be reasonable to say that it took a person between 3 and 5 days. I defer to your expertise. I've never produced a report like that. But
A lot longer than that.
yeah, yes. I imagined it was significantly longer. I've done some certificate of need work.
So is that
prior.
like some dollar per day or something?
It's $1,000 per day of
Okay.
continued violation. That's right.
Okay, so we're 3 to 5 days and...
I figured we probably would only be going up from there, so it was a
it would
safe
be going up,
ballpark.
sure.
They would go like 1,000 a week, because that'd probably
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. Okay, well, that's a rationale.
Have the motion and second. Are folks ready to vote on the committee for this or against it? The motion will recommend a $5,000 penalty. Call the question, and Gabe, I understand you will abstain or recuse. All in favor of the motion as it sits, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, say nay. Okay, the recommendation will be made to the full board tomorrow accordingly. Thanks.
So number 25, the licensing contractor board initiated this complaint again. This is an individual, you've got a licensee who was not enrolled in peer review but provided a review. The recommendations for a formal hearing for the maximum penalty with authority to settle via consent order for the payment of a $3,000 fine for failing to be enrolled in peer review. Any questions on that one? Okay, so y'all took care of 24, and so we've looked at everything else in this section, so I will entertain a motion for numbers 15 through 23 and number 25 that we would recommend to the board tomorrow to accept legal counsel's recommendation.
Second. Oh, we got to make the motion.
So moved.
Have a motion, is there a second?
Second.
Motion, second, any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye. Aye. All those opposed? All right. The last three, number 26 is here for recommended for discussion, so can I go ahead and turn that over to legal counsel for y'all to discuss?
Yes, this one, it started out similar in nature to the other ones with the Board of Licensing Contractor Complaints. However, it's become more complex moving through that scenario. So in this case, the Board of Licensing Contractors referred this to us after there was a review, one of the typical reviews that we've talked about, attached to an application. The respondent since then has actually attempted to enroll in peer review, and as a result turned in a signed affidavit stating her experience in a test work was from her work at the respondent, her own firm, since 2007, which in that period of time she's never been enrolled in peer review. and therefore is pursuant to the language of that affidavit, is swearing to 10 years of unpeer-reviewed attest work. Respondent's firm was never enrolled. It's unclear whether the respondent meant that she performed a test work or whether that was just her experience. We haven't really had that clarified. An investigation by the board's investigator would help, I think, flush out kind of the extent of a test work that is occurring here. And so at this point, I said, regardless, at this point is legal's recommendation to at least move forward on $3,000 civil penalty for failing to enroll in peer review pursuant to the complaint that came from the licensing contractors. And we would defer to you, because what we can also do is separate those two things. We could say, all right, we know you did this attest work for this licensing contractor's complaint, but it's also possible through another action, through a board-initiated complaint, you've provided evidence to the board that you've done other attest work through a period of time. So, so the reason I brought this for discussion was, first, from Wendy's team really is, can we or should we accept experience to be enrolled in peer review that is a test work that would have been performed in violation of the rules? Because the way that the rule reads now is that experience is accepted by the board. There isn't a lot of clarification of what that experience necessarily needs to be. It just says as the board would accept. So that's the first question we wanted to set for discussion, was whether this experience should count and whether we should allow her to enroll in peer review. And Wendy can speak.
Well, so typically when somebody applies for a firm permit, they provide us with 2 years. If they want to do a test work, they provide us with 2 years of experience, either preparing or reporting on financial statements. So this individual did not do that at the time that she was initially licensed as a firm. So now we find out the firm is performing a test work, and we don't have that experience requirement on file. So she submits experience, the signed experience form, claiming that her 2 years of experience is within her own firm that she was never really approved to do. So this is where we were caught up in, is this, we would not, if this had been an initial firm application, we would have told them that wasn't acceptable. But it doesn't say it has to be under the supervision of anybody. It just says preparing or reporting on financial statements. So it's very broad. We do accept a lot of experience.
It was never peer reviewed, right?
Right. And in addition, however long she's been doing it, she's never been enrolled in peer review.
Say that her experience is proper experience.
Correct. And so there's two kind of issues here. One, is she licensed to continue to do a test work even if she enrolls in peer review, or is she required to go obtain that 2 years of experience somewhere else or through some other means?
Chicken and egg problem.
Yeah.
So did you say there's no requirement in our rules to have supervision?
Not in that particular.
I'm wondering, how do you get the experience?
I'll find the rule.
Yeah, the chicken and egg, but how do you get the experience?
You work for somebody else, usually.
It definitely can be technical experience, and she's not working for somebody else, just for herself.
There's also, I mean, how do I know the experience that she got was proper experience due to the fact that she never enrolled in peer review?
Peer review. When she's enrolled, but I guess my concern would be the fact that if she's been doing this all along, that we need to find out what she's been doing, right, and go a step further.
I agree with that. I do think, though, the experience is suspect, because if she was issuing reports, who's to say she wasn't just issuing a report and not doing all the work that goes along with it? So who's to say that her experience? And I wouldn't see that either.
All right, I don't know, what does the rule say?
So the rule is 0020-02-.03D. In accordance with Tennessee Code Annotated 62-1-108C2, An individual licensee is responsible for supervising a test services and signs or authorizes another person to sign the accountant's report on the financial statements on behalf of the firm, shall meet professional competency requirements and shall have no less than 2 years of experience satisfactory to the board in the preparation of financial statements or reports on financial statements.
Satisfactory, that's my opinion.
That's what I would have said, but we don't really have any more information than this rule.
And that, I would not proceed on this until you fully vet this individual, would be my, and maybe that individual needs to come before this board and explain what they've been doing. I don't know.
Preparing reports mean it has to be, it's in a test function?
If they issue a compilation, a review, or an audit report, then it's...
So I would think, I mean, even outside the board discretion, I mean, the rule says, I mean, the way I would read it is you've got to have experience preparing a report to having a test function. So 2 years of a test-related type of services. And you can't just do that if you're not peer-reviewed, right?
It has not been interpreted that because, let me read the last part, 2 years of experience satisfactory to the board in the preparation of financial statements or reports on financial statements.
All right, but I would think that if preparation of financial statements isn't sufficient, 2 years, if that's all the experience you have for 2 years, that's not sufficient to become a test.
We don't have enough proper reports because they were never peer reviewed. I mean, my point is that one probably never should have gotten the application. I think the experience is not right. She never had the application. She was issuing reports against our rules, and she was claiming experience that was self-administered, or however you want to term it.
Right.
So I don't see how we could possibly do that. I think we do need more information, and I'm not sure it would lock us in on just this issue at the time being. I would probably dig further, or at least have that individual. We need to flesh out what in the world they've been doing.
Can we do that, Sarah? Yes, and so what I was hoping, or at least would recommend, would be to move forward on a $3,000 civil penalty, at least just for the contractor's complaint, and then we will open a complaint based on her affidavit, and then move forward on investigating her experience prior
Okay,
to.
remind me again what the 3,000 is for.
The 3,000 would be for that would include one peer review period for the audit, or rather the financial report she produced for the contractor's board, probably at the end of last year. So it would be the 3 years she should have been encompassed. Now, since she's...
Well, I mean, what's y'all's opinion of just kind of hitting this thing at multiple points? I mean, it's kind of like, do we need to handle this as one massive thing, or do we need to come
I think
and...
she's trying to suggest we break it up. So we just go ahead and deal with the peer review violation now, and then we'll go back and do more in-depth for the experience.
And what's the rationale for that, just out of curiosity?
Practicality of it is we have two different complainants, first off, so really it probably should be two complaints that we would ultimately merge, and I still believe that would probably happen here. We would get authorization on a complaint that's already been pending for the contractor's board, so we can move forward on a $3,000 penalty. And the reason I'm fine with that is that if we have backwards looking and look beyond that 3 years, we would just assess 3 more years for each 3-year period. So it's not like...
And the board has denied this report, I presume, right?
The contractor's
renewal?
board, correct.
The renewal of the contractor because of this report being deficient?
Yeah,
Correct.
in reality, what would likely happen is we would be moving forward on the contractor's complaints. We would open up the complaint on the rest of it, and if we do determine that, yes, she meant when she signed that affidavit she was doing a test work, we would bring it to you at the next meeting, and in the most likely scenarios, we'd combine them into one big hearing.
And what is that, 1,000? What's the 3,000? Is that just a standard, or is that a...
That is the standard for a CPA, not...
Okay. It's on my matrix.
On your matrix.
It's in the matrix.
It's in the matrix.
$1,000 a year for 3 years.
That's what I was thinking, is 1,000 for 3 years? Is
That's
that what
where
it is?
that's where it comes from.
Okay.
We're liking that matrix.
We're very glad that you do.
So did the contractor's report, was this the first, or was this the only evidence the contractor's board has of a report issued by this person?
There are multiple reports. We've had one since.
Oh, that's a prior
We have, we have had an additional report submitted since,
By this individual?
like in the past week.
For a different contractor?
Yes.
Well, that's what I'm wondering. Can we go to the contractors? I know this has been relatively recent, but can we just go ask them, as just a base level, how prevalent is this, and get them to go back and see if they can find any other old reports submitted by this person?
We can definitely ask. I'm not 100% sure they would be able to search by the CPA We could obviously look at the history of the clients that she provided reports for these two instances. I apologize, I did forget that she had submitted one after this complaint was open. So we could go back and look at those particular clients and then look at their applications back through time and see if she also submitted reports there, for sure.
Have you talked to this lady?
No.
You have.
No, we've communicated via email. I think Karen's talked to her, and I was reluctant to tell her whether her experience qualified or not,
Right.
because I wanted the support
She's
of the
fully
board.
aware that she's not enrolled in peer review, right?
She's
at this
fully
point?
aware she's not enrolled in peer review. I don't think she's clear that her experience is not acceptable.
It's not acceptable.
regardless, you shouldn't be doing it. I guess my question is, if we don't do anything on this one, is the contractor board, do they know that this person can't do it? I mean, I guess if we don't do anything, is it going to harm the contractors that are going out and paying this person money for, you know, a renewal of a vitally important business permit for them, and then they end up not getting the business permit, have to wait 60 days to get it or whatever it is? I mean, is there something about our inaction on this case that's going to cause harm to the public?
Public,
Well, they're going to deny the license if it's from the CPA at this point.
They are, yes, and obviously at this point, we've engaged in a dialogue, this board staff, with her about what is required, and despite that, a report was given to the board that she probably.
Well, you're saying that.
Yes, that she's still doing.
Still doing it.
Moving
right?
forward,
After we
so-
told her not to do it. So contractors are out there using this person, and my
So
question
there is
is,
harm
if
to-
we don't do something, does that mean, do we need to do something so we can inform the contracting public? Or not?
I think that's why I really wanted to go ahead and
Okay.
move forward on this complaint.
That makes more sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
Any other questions on 26?
My question is, we're doing 3,000 for not being in the peer review, but I mean, she's continuing to issue reports. I mean, I'm kind of getting that.
Right, and I feel like I need to clarify or confirm with her that she is able to continue to do this work or not. That's,
But tell her no. Has she gotten a valid peer review at this point?
no.
Well,
Enrolled, yeah.
Enroll without experience?
It's possible she
Is that right?
thought since she's in the process.
She never enrolled or even attempted to enroll in peer review. That's the problem, right?
Right.
All the way from 2007 at least.
But if she enrolls in peer review, are you all right with
How
that?
long has she been out of peer review? I mean, how long has
She's
she been
never
doing it?
been
We don't know
in.
how long this is going on.
She's never been in unless.
Farm permit was.
I told her she's not allowed to issue
20-
reports, and we
2002.
need to find out what the heck else she's been doing. And I'm not so sure, I mean, she knows she's not in peer review, and she's still issuing reports. That's a bigger problem to me, that,
Yes.
have we communicated to her that she should not be issuing reports?
I mean, she knows that without being enrolled in peer review, she shouldn't
Can't
be
do it.
issuing reports.
And she should know the rules and laws and whatever.
Do we know the timing of this second report, though? It just came in. How long has it been done? I don't know how long the investigation's been.
Well, she
open.
shouldn't have submitted it. She should have alerted her contractor that, hey, I'm not acceptable to the board of contractors to be issuing this report. So she's intentionally harming a client at this point.
I think Wendy may back this up. Our general interpretation is she's very much trying to just get through the work she has and just kind of satisfy us so she can continue working. Which
Then
is
I
the
would
issue.
suggest we up this penalty. That's my,
Yeah, and I think that we will do that, and the reason that I hesitate only on that is that I think that there is an opportunity for a significant penalty going backwards looking, all the way back to 2007, that I would be bringing you, in the way that I view it, is in the next meeting as a new complaint with our investigator being involved, where I can back it up and bring you a complaint that would go in addition to this one. So you would get the 3,000 on just the one attest report, and then all of these other ones, the new report, plus the year she swore she was also doing the services, I would bring as another probably fairly significant civil penalty. And possibly, I mean, maybe even at that point, we would consider a license status recommendation, a suspension.
as part of this, you're going to tell her she should not be issuing statements
Yes,
at this
and the
point?
consent order will have a cease and desist language,
Okay.
as it always does. And then we will, if the investigator's showing up at her front, just to be frank, having someone come up and ask you for all of your audit reports and start digging through your file.
Can I ask a side question? This relates to the, what do you call it, the ALD, whatever this thing. When we issue these consent orders, or whatever we call them, my question becomes now, if we're going to be posting these people on the website, does that need to be part of the language in these
Or is disclosing that it's a
disclosing that their name is now about to be public.
Well,
I mean, it is public now, but now it's going onto a website. My question
It
is,
is on the website.
It is also on a website.
it is on our
now.
website?
It's on our website.
Yes. And
It's
so,
actually on the state's website on disciplinary actions to licensees across the state.
Okay.
If you go down each month, there's a report.
So that
by the
doesn't matter
boards
then?
that tells you
Okay.
what they've been done.
Got it.
I mean, and the reason I also caveated this out is if you want to say that her signing that affidavit back to 2007, swearing to do a test work is sufficient, we can go ahead and assess penalties for each set of 3 years up to the, so every year.
I still think you need to gather more
$10,000.
information before we go that route.
I agree.
Because I don't know.
That would make me feel more comfortable, especially now that we have an investigator capable of determining what is, a test work, what is not.
I'm not so sure not having her come here and address the board and explain her actions is not appropriate either. I mean,
You can push it to a formal hearing, and then we can make that happen, because it's a licensee, so it would appear before
I guess if
you.
they consent to it, what's the point? But it troubles me that you say she's got a reputation for just getting through stuff and then dealing with us later and saying,
That seems to be that's what we've picked up recently.
That's just a feeling,
Yes.
or just as how she's dealt with this.
Yes, it's, And it could be that she just had a lot of these in the tubes, and it's throwing her off of what she thought she'd be finishing, but.
I'd like to make a recommendation to the committee that we make a motion on a penalty amount for this one instance so we can actually take action to protect the public, and then also include direction to the staff about what we think about the experience that she has, whether or not that counts for the application. Does anybody have?
One instance being not being enrolled in the peer review?
Mm-hmm.
So for that, I would recommend that we proceed with the legal recommendation of a $3,000 penalty for that one peer review alleged violation.
This one report.
Yeah.
Okay.
Second that.
What about any, all right, we have a motion second, any discussion? Can I offer a friendly amendment to the motion? Is that we also direct the staff, or we recommend to the board to direct the staff tomorrow that the experience that she has, if it's just her own experience, doesn't count for the experience that she needs to enroll in peer review, absent her coming before the board and explaining circumstances that somehow reveals that the facts are different than we understand them. So my request would be that amend the motion to say we would authority to settle via consent order and payment of a $3,000 fine for this one instance, along with direction to the board that they advise her that the experience that she has sworn that she has since 2007 isn't sufficient to enroll in peer review.
Well, the concern I would have with that is I don't know if it was sufficient or not. I think that's something that the investigator is going to need to see before we make that judgment.
Well, I think it sounds like we need to give direction to Wendy and her team, though, about what to tell her.
I would say self-directed experience is kind of I'm not sure I'm comfortable with that.
Well, if that's all it is,
Right.
I agree with you. I just am not sure that's all it is. I don't have the facts to.
I'm not sure we're talking about this particular instance.
I'm just saying
in
we say,
general,
based
if
on what you
somebody
told
were to
us.
come up and ask Wendy, hey, I did this on my own for 2 years, how are we guiding staff as to related to that issue? Not this particular person, but just in general.
Mine's to this particular person, based on what she's sworn, that wouldn't be sufficient. If she has different facts and wants to explain it, she can come up and do that. That doesn't keep her from introducing, other facts. But, I mean, Wendy, if you don't want it, the recommendation, we won't do it. But
No, I absolutely do, because I think if she may try to go enroll in peer review and think she's okay to continue to do this work, and I feel uncomfortable with that. So
can you very briefly just go back and explain the experience that she swore to that she had, which is what the issue is for the committee members? Or is it something that you want to present to the board as a whole tomorrow, and then we can have the board make the
I
decision?
think I'm going to have to try to locate that document.
Okay. So then I withdraw my very long friendly amendment. And so the point would be my acquaintance amendment, so that we just vote on the motion that's been proposed and seconded, and then the board can take it up as a whole tomorrow on the experience once Wendy has a chance to go back and find that information. Are y'all good with that? Janet, you don't?
Yes,
Okay.
yes,
All right,
yes.
just make sure. All right, so motion the second. Any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Okay, the last two, 27 and 28, are representations. Can I kick this back over to y'all as well to do these two?
These are actually both mine. On number 27, this was an individual who was running a website that had the name Accounting Services included in it. And so the recommendation that was adopted last meeting was that it was a $1,000 penalty to be reduced to a letter of warning if they voluntarily came into compliance with our naming requirements. And so they did change their name. They signed an order basically stating they'd cease and desist and would be in compliance with that rule going forward. So it's just a representation to reduce that penalty down to the letter of warning.
Discussion or questions? Okay. Number 28, we knocked that one out too?
Yeah, number 28, this is a little bit different. You might remember this case from last time also. This is an individual who had gone through a series of family and personal tragedies, but regardless of all that, she was convicted of a felony, including conspiracy to commit wire fraud, mail and bank fraud, due to signing mortgages fraudulently prepared by her husband. We went with a recommendation of revocation against this individual. When I communicated that to her, she kind of dusted off an old procedure that we had where the board would set one-on-one meetings with a member from this board with this individual, let her tell her side of the story. I had discussed this with the people who have been in the department the longest, and it does seem that there's some truth to what she is saying, that previously what we would do on these revocations is we would send a board member to meet with an individual if a board member wanted to hear her side of the story, and if she could convince the board member that maybe instead of revocation I should have a suspension or pay a civil penalty, the board member can then come back and recommend that to our disciplinary committee. So I discussed this with Wendy and my managers, and we thought the best thing to do on this was just present it to this committee and see if anybody would like to volunteer to meet with her, hear her side of the story, and report back at the July meeting.
Why wouldn't she just be able to come to a hearing at the July meeting and do this?
That's what I communicated to her, and Wendy and I discussed that if all she wants to do is come and try to tell her side of the story and garner sympathy, that she could do that at a hearing, but she is insistent upon trying to go back to this old model that we previously used. So I just wanted to.
When did we do that?
Or anybody at this table.
Well, it happened when I first started coming to these meetings. It was happening because I would have to wait for the informal conferences to be over.
They were held here now. We
Yeah.
didn't go out.
Yeah, they were held here.
And there were several of them, and basically what would happen is the board member would agree to meet one-on-one during the conference with legal, and they would go through the facts and see if something else could be brought back, and then those amended, if they were amended, recommendation will be brought back to the board for ratification before it was official. But they were held here. We didn't do any house calls, and
Well, I mean, obviously you know more about the procedure than
no,
you do.
this is my
Your
almost
past-
ninth year here, so
Other than saving time at the board meeting, what was the purpose?
it's something that's
Are
been
there investigators then?
That's what they call the informal conference, I think, and that the board member was involved in it. If I,
She's been licensed since 2003, and I know she had a 2005 consent order she signed for $250, so maybe, back when that happened, maybe she witnessed that going on, or somebody told her about that process.
My thought process would be if she wants to come and address the board, that she come address the board, but, I mean, it's my opinion, I would not meet one-on-one with anybody without having the rest of the board hear what was being said.
I feel like
He said, she said too.
Right.
We're going to have to turn around and go through the same steps. Why not just get everyone here at the same time?
Have it on the record.
And she's pleaded guilty to a felony. I mean,
She has her reasons that she claims that she did that.
She did it.
but she did it. I mean, that's,
I understand.
mean,
I'm just,
do we even have to let her come? I mean, I guess we,
you don't have to let her come. She requested it. Apparently, it's something we used to do, and she knows that we used to do it, so we thought it best to give an opportunity if anybody would like to meet with her. I guess the idea being if she can convince one person, then that one person could come and advocate her cause at the committee.
Just don't know if that's the appropriate role for the board members, in my personal opinion. I think it needs to be done in the open and transparent, and I don't want any backroom deals cut or any allegations. I don't think anybody here would, but I don't want allegations for that. My suggestion would be for this committee that we recommend to the board that we don't do that if she wants to come. We're all a reasonable group and we're friendly and we'd love to have her. We may even have coffee, I guess, maybe if she would come, but we need to do it, I think, in the open public eye.
Is it possible the ethics rules changing impact our ability to do that? I mean, I know there was a lot more meetings in various areas that, didn't have to be as public.
Other boards still do something similar to this. It's just, as long as it's only one member, it can be off the record.
Any kind of motion or something we got to do on this?
She asking for the opportunity to explain why she pleaded guilty or why she committed the felony?
All of it.
I mean, because if she's committed a felony, there's no question.
He's wanting to get the sympathy factor, I'm sure.
Well, and if she does that in a formal hearing, we'll listen and decide.
That's what I say.
The one question I have to clarify, I mean, we've had a gap here where we have not had an investigator, and is there anything about this that would cause not having an investigator and able to, kind of make some of the inquiries, go out there and poke around a little bit, that would be something that we're lacking, that we
This
normally
was
would have?
investigated.
Okay.
Dawn did do an investigation.
Okay, all right, thank you.
And so, my recommendation was to have a formal hearing, but we thought that to let you all have a chance, if you wanted to meet with her one-on-one, that we give you that opportunity.
It's a formal hearing, it's just a matter of her addressing this body, right? We've already
If she were to
decided
come
this,
here and
haven't we?
address the full body, we'd need to do a formal hearing.
I mean, we got to have an administrative law judge and everything else?
The reason for the formal hearing is because the board may revoke her license, so she's entitled.
Oh, we haven't done this one yet. Is that what we're saying? We haven't revoked this license?
You authorized at the 2 meetings ago, I can't remember, the last meeting or to the revocation of her license based on the information you were providing.
He has not accepted that.
And she has not accepted voluntary revocation and wants to talk to somebody about it.
The last action we recommended was revocate a formal hearing with authority to settle the consent order, right?
Correct.
So what we could say is we want to stick with our original recommendation, and we're happy to have a formal hearing, but we're not going to do the one-off thing, right?
Correct.
Okay. I'll accept a motion.
So moved.
All right. Second. All right. We've got a motion and a second. The motion is to accept our original recommendation, or assert our original recommendation. Any other discussions? All those in favor, say aye. Aye. All those opposed? All right. So I don't believe we did 27. That's the one we missed, right? All right. So I saw y'all talking over there. I figured I messed up.
We did 27. That was the one where they changed their name, and we're going to move that to
We didn't vote on it.
Oh,
We didn't vote on it.
I just meant we didn't go over it.
You're right. So entertain a recommendation on number 27 to accept legal counsel's recommendation.
So moved.
We have motions or second?
Second.
Motion second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? All right. That concludes the Enforcement Committee.
Thank you, Gabe. Good report, and I have a motion on the floor to take a recess. And I know I've got enough seconds to pass. So.
A second.
We'll reconvene in about 10 or 15 minutes, quick as you can get back. Hey, that was a good, well-thought report.
See y'all next time.
I think we have everyone here.
Hey, Law and Rules Committee, as we reconvene, Trey Watkins, Chair.
Okay. First thing we've got here is the peer review submission. With some language to talk about the peer review submission rules, and apparently the AICPA.
I'm sorry, apparently this AICPA had some comments on that. It was recommendations.
Yes. So at the last meeting, you all approved some additional rules to clarify peer review submission requirements. And after we approved those, the AICPA came back with some comments and suggestions to the rules that we had initially proposed. And you'll see that in your documents. I don't remember what I titled it.
I think it was called peer review submission or something like that.
Peer review.
Peer review is the
AICPA
AICPA letter. So if you'll refer to that document, it gives you a good sense of the track changes. So the rule document that we provided you is, in essence, just incorporating their changes. And mainly, there's not a significant difference here. Really what it is in the first section, we strike out within 30 days after the acceptance of a peer review. Well, there are some items in A through E that you can't submit physically 30 days after the acceptance because they're not available yet. So the recommendation was good. We needed to remove that. So it's just to make sure that firms can comply with this requirement. And then in the second item there, we changed the word commence to the word scheduled. And for any of you involved in peer review, those are heavily defined terms in the peer review world. And so commencing is a date on which the field work begins on your peer review, and it is fluid from time to time and hard for the administering entity to control that date. So scheduled date was a better terminology to use here. That's when a firm completes their schedule, or when the administering entity enters or takes the information from the scheduling form and approves the peer reviewer. That's the time when the firm is advised that their documents would be made available to the board through the facilitated state board access, and that they also have the option of expanding to other states. So that terminology change from commencing to scheduled we also thought was a good change. And then the rest is just really a better clarification with their standards and to make sure everybody can comply appropriately. So these have been shared internally. Legal has reviewed these, as well as TSCPA has reviewed these as well, and all of us were in agreement that these were good changes. So are there any questions?
Just as a clarification, go ahead.
The AICPA had recommended after January 1, and ours still shows after September 1. Was there a reason we kept?
Okay, actually, right, okay, so the original one you approved said January 1. We changed it to September 1 because the terminology of commence and scheduled is different, and I asked them after they submitted their changes, I said, would you all be okay with September 1 instead of January? And the reasoning for that is because obviously a review that happens in June of 18 is going to be scheduled in the fall of 17. So I wanted to try to capture as many as we could. If we waited till January, we were delaying even more. And everyone was okay with that September 1 date. So we are looking for you to approve these revisions.
You need an approval, but this will ultimately go to a rules-making session, right? Where we will then actually approve these.
Well, these are proposed rules, so they will go through the process, and if there are not more than 10 people that comment, or 10 people from an organization, I don't know what exactly the rules are, but as long as someone doesn't comment or there's no huge disagreement, then they will go through the process without it coming back to the board.
And one other question. On that first page, revision type, it's identified as new, and then when you look at the changed rule, the red line rules, it has amendment, and I don't know if that has any bearing whatsoever.
Tell me again where you are.
Okay.
On page 2 of the red line, it says new rules. Is that what you're looking at?
No, on page 2 of the red line, well, at the top it says amendment, at the very top.
That was just an oversight in drafting. We can change that to amendment to match the top of the page, so it should read amendment.
Okay, I didn't know if that made any difference.
Oh, no, I appreciate you pointing it out. Thank you.
That's this one.
Okay, so you're needing a motion with this revision to be moved, I don't know what the term is, into the rulemaking, or I guess what, just to votes to approve the approved rule?
We'll need this committee to approve the edited draft of this peer review rule, and I'm sorry, approve to recommend it to the board, and then tomorrow at the board meeting, we'll read the full.
For the record?
Yes, government ops information into the record,
Okay.
and then we'll do a roll call vote.
Have a motion?
Make a motion that this committee recommends to the board to accept the proposed rule as laid out in front of us.
Have a motion, do I have a second? Second. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Y'all want to go ahead and walk through these additional rule change proposals?
Sure. Okay, so I titled that rule change proposals on your iPad. Okay, these are things that the board has not asked us to make changes to. They are things that we have found along the way that could be improved. So if something here doesn't sound good, let me know. So we did make a change recently to the expired license. So if you will recall, a license went into what we called a delinquent period for 12 months, and then it went to expired. We shortened that to 6 months in another section of the rules. What we failed to do is in the definitions section, we failed to redefine expired license. So the first item here is you will see how it reads now, and then you will see with the blue wording what we're requesting the change to be. So we would remove the definition. Expired license means a license that is more than 1 year past the expiration date. We would change that to expired license means a license that is more than 6 months past the expiration date. So this would coincide with the other rule that we recently revised. So do you want to wait till the end of this before we vote on anything?
I think that would be best.
Okay, so the next rule change is similar in nature. We have a different definition for license in statute than what we have in rule. And the definition in rule only defines an individual license. But when you go throughout the firm section, you kind of just assume that a firm license also applies. And so we wanted to better define license so that it included firm licenses as well, so that we could better enforce the other rules. So the strike through J there is what's currently in rule. License or licensing means a CPA certificate or a public accountant registration granted by the board. And we are proposing to change that to mimic what it says in statute. License means a certificate issued under 62-1-107. A permit issued under 62-1-108, or a registration under 62-1-109, or in each case, a certificate, license, or permit issued under corresponding provisions of prior law. So this would just encompass license to mean any type of license.
And it makes people work to figure out what it is.
There's that.
I guess we could have not referred to statute, but it was easier.
Mind exercises for soul failures.
Okay, any questions on that one before I move to the third one?
Is registration and permit the same thing, or was that just, does that need to be?
I think a permit, a firm permit is how we typically refer to a firm license as a firm permit. And then a registration under 109.
I was just noticing that you said or registration under 109, and then it's, I guess in summary says a certificate, license, or permit, but it doesn't mention registration. I don't know if that's necessary to.
Okay, 109 is public accountants.
Yeah.
Just use that terminology within that chapter or that section.
Either way, it aligns us with
Yeah.
statute.
It just includes firms
So-
within the definition of license, so that there's no confusion as to, I think we ran into an issue about a late fee being assessed, and we've always assessed them against firm permits, but it really wasn't, it mentioned a license, but a license doesn't refer to a firm. So,
I have a quick question, and it's probably just because I'm so new to this, but does a firm, is there a different form or permit that they fill out to be able to enroll in peer review and do a test services, or is that all in the same application?
they fill out an application to obtain a firm permit. And with that application, they submit their 2 years of experience, which would authorize them to perform a test work. And then they are under the obligation to enroll in peer review within 30 days if they're going to perform a test work. So they tell us in that application, we say, are you going to perform a test work? And they say yes or no. If they say yes, we give them 30 days to enroll in the program. And
Okay. So,
and then when they enroll in peer review, that's a different application,
Right,
different
okay.
process.
And so, like, currently, if I was just, with this, looking at these definitions and whatnot, so if the Board of, if someone, a contractor is looking to see if someone is qualified to be preparing a report for them, would they be able to see that anywhere? Okay.
No, because when a firm permit is issued, it is not, you don't get a different type of permit
Okay.
based
So-
on whether you can perform a test work or not.
Okay. I was just curious. It seems, yeah.
Any more questions? Okay. You move forward, Wendy?
Okay. Yes, the last one. Okay. Okay, in the last section here, the red number 11 that's marked out reads, a licensee once per reporting period may submit for approval up to 16 hours of CPE from courses that are sponsored by organizations that are not registered with NASBA and are either offered on a limited basis or industry specific. So we recently added this rule, okay? And we did that because it was in policy and it was determined that it is better in rule, okay? So I'm just taking you through how we got where we are. So now that it is in rule, we've had a huge uptick in requests. And so the question is, when do they have to submit this approval for these 16 hours? Do they have to submit it before they take it, or can they submit it at any time?
I would say
Okay?
prior to.
So number 9 that's crossed out says, in order to ensure credit, any program of continuing education not specifically covered by this rule must be submitted to the board for evaluation before attendance or completion. Prior to, I think, Ben joining us as legal counsel, they had always required these documents be submitted beforehand. We then had an issue where somebody submitted something after the fact, and Ben said, well, the board can consider it. It just says to ensure credit, to basically provide insurance that you would know you must submit it beforehand, but doesn't mean the board can't consider it if they look at it after the fact. So we considered a few after the fact. So what however, we've run into a little issue with this. So here's an example. We are just starting the audit process. So someone submits all of their continuing education, and now they want to say, oh, wait, I've got these 16 hours that I took a year and a half ago. Can I submit these under this rule for approval? So there's a timing issue about when is the appropriate time for them to submit a request for these 16 hours that fall outside of our rules. And so we are proposing that we clarify the wording in the new number 9 that would require it be submitted prior to taking the course to receive credit.
It will not be considered,
Correct.
period, after.
And it would not be considered if you had already taken it. Did I do an okay job explaining?
Yes.
Would you run through that one more time?
We're going to miss dinner if you keep it up.
We've already missed dinner. We're going to miss supper.
Supper, man.
Wendy will have breakfast for you in the morning.
That's right.
All right.
Any discussion on this issue? So that's the last one that we need to consider with this block of
I think so.
rule changes, right?
Yes.
Do I have a motion on these blocks of rule changes?
I'll move that we approve the changes as presented.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, ayes have it. Wendy, do we want to move into this fictitious names issue?
Well,
I know Gabe's not here, but
I know.
Supposed to have
Maybe-
done that before he left.
Well, Gabe ran long.
Maybe what I can do is I can introduce the subject.
Let me ask you a quick question,
Okay.
because I showed him what I had, and he indicated that I may not have whatever he marked up. Is
Okay,
that accurate?
So that is accurate. So what is on your iPad, though,
Is accurate.
includes what I created and sent to you, and then the second document includes his further
I can't
edits.
find what you sent to me.
On your, you can't find what I sent to you?
Yes.
I sent it with my follow-up documents on Tuesday.
They, at 5:30.
But what's on your iPad is the full extent of the document.
Okay.
So the first page of what's on your iPad, it's titled Fictitious Names. The first page is the original page that Liz and I worked on. And then the second page is Gabe reviewed what we had worked on, and he provided several comments. So I'm going to let Liz, you want to explain or you want me to explain?
Either one. I was just
Okay.
going to add a couple things to what you said.
Oh, okay.
I was just going to add that legal and Wendy worked together to, the first document that you're looking at, the one that does not have Gabe's changes, this was really our first attempt to kind of carve out some of the comments that the board has made over the past few board meetings to see, so that you could kind of see where in the rule, your comments and suggestions would fit. This is kind of a step one, and we wanted your feedback so that we could kind of craft the rule more closely to what you're really seeking. This was kind of a first base for us.
So maybe to step back for a second, you all have dealt with these fictitious names for multiple meetings, multiple years, and there were comments at the last meeting that for staff to work on some suggestions that would help clean up this to help you all make easier decisions. So I had this on the board's agenda. Gabe had really wanted to be part of the discussion and can't be here tomorrow, so we moved it to today, and now he's had to leave. So it could be something that you all take with you and digest, and we talk about at the next meeting, because I know that he's had...
Wendy, I would suggest we do that because this subject has received a lot of discussion since I've been on the board. I mean, and I just think if we're going to do something with it, we need to be careful and do it right. So,
well, I guess what I would ask is that if you all could really take some time over the next couple of months and look at this, and please send me your thoughts individually so that if there's any clear consensus of some cleanup we could do between now and the next meeting to make it a little, you can see what we did, then you can see Gabe's comments and things he was looking for, and he actually offers 2 scenarios based on your personal thoughts on the direction you would like to move. Are you more lenient in fictitious names, or would you like to stay more traditional in fictitious names? And maybe send me your thoughts and your comments, and we can provide the best product.
So,
Can you summarize those comments and send back to the board meeting?
Sure.
Is that
Sure. Yeah.
so we don't have this document right here.
You have it on your iPad, but you do not have the full document.
Are you gonna
So I
email?
will send that along with the other document, whatever that was that I told you I would send to you.
what you said? You said 1 page on this.
Correct. I sent 1 page, and then Gabe and I have had some discussions, and he edited it after I sent it to you. And so,
Got a lot of comments, it's not just a few.
yes.
are you going to send us his comments so we can have the benefit of those?
Yes, so I will send you this document that's on your iPad since you don't have it in your hand, and y'all can look at that.
This includes Gabe's comments?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
And
All right, so we're going to...
I was just going to say, just as a reminder, if you find that after looking at all these changes, you want to keep the rule as is, that's an option as well.
You mean trash all Gabe's comments? That's what you're saying?
Thanks, Gary.
I didn't say that.
All right, with that, that concludes the, I don't think I'm missing anything, right? That's it, Wendy, right?
Correct.
Yep, that concludes our report.
We'll move then into the, thank you for a good report. We'll move into the executive committee. Wendy, you got several reports, your director's reports and all, so in whatever order you'd like to take them, let's...
Okay, well, we'll just go down the list here. Your FY17 year-to-date financial results, you should see that named the same on your iPad and in your document. So these are as of February. At the time I prepared this, I didn't have March yet. I received March a couple of days ago. So anyway, this is as of February, which I know is a little dated, but I think the picture is still the same, even at my glance of what I received earlier this week. We're doing very well. We have gross revenues at just over $1 million, at $1,02,930, so we're just 2% over last year at the same time. We have realized most of the state regulatory fee for the year because that is based on each license issued or renewed. And we've done most of our renewals, so the bulk of that is being realized. We don't expect a whole lot more revenue. It would be case and complaint revenue, and we will get some licensing, but it's likely going to be $8,000 or so a month. We won't see a significant jump in revenue. And then you'll see the expenses listed down below that. I tried to highlight a couple areas in blue just so you could see where we were exceeding budget, and I give me a chance to explain that real quick. In the longevity compensation area, we are unfavorable to budget. Our retirement payouts for Brenda and Dawn fell here when they left, so there was a bump there. In addition, the state, when they gave raises this year, if you had an exceptional and outstanding rating, you received a bonus, and so those bonuses went here as well. So we were a little ahead of a budget there. And then under computer-related items, we are unfavorable to budget mainly because of a yearly expense of $3,500 or so to cover some equipment and services associated with Zendesk, which is our customer service platform that we were not anticipating this year. So all in all, we have regular expenditures currently at $391,894. Preliminary cost-backs to date are $144,366, with our total expenditures at $536,260, which gives us, to date, $379,000 to reserves. If we consistently, for the next 4 months, we're averaging between $50,000 and $60,000 in monthly expenses, so we're going to be at over $100,000 going to reserves, is about where I anticipate us to land. So we do have an issue that we're going to be bringing to you at the next board meeting that could significantly affect, based on your decision, our financial picture. So although we look like we might have a lot of money, I'd like to get through that discussion before we talk about whether we should reduce fees or change anything related to our budget. So are there any comments about any of this?
You're just going to make us think about that.
Okay, so
I got a secret, I'm not telling you.
okay, so in our rules, we have a rule that states that if you are 65 or older and inactive, you do not have to pay your renewal fee. Okay? So
But you still have to pay the professional license, don't you, to Tennessee?
I know, but I said that, but they want to know kind of what it's about. No, it's okay, it's okay. So practically we have been putting people in a retired 65 status if they do not want to practice and do not want to pay their fee. We had an individual that is inactive and turned 65, and she did not want to pay the renewal fee, but she also didn't want to move to a 65 retired status. And so her challenge was actually caused a little bit of concern, because it may mean that anybody that's 65 and inactive, even if they don't want to move to retired, we may not may not be required to pay a renewal fee. So there could be some financial challenges there. But it's a long...
Rule change.
Uh-huh.
Sounds to me like
It could be a rule change. It could also be a statute change, and we'll get into that at the next meeting. Does that help enough?
Yeah, I feel a lot better now.
Okay. All right. All right. All right, so are there any questions about the financial results or any of those specific line items? Okay. All right, travel is an easy one. I went to the NASBA Eastern Regional, and I think that's the only thing on the report. So that is it for travel. And then the last item on the Executive Committee agenda is the evolution of peer review. At the last meeting, we reviewed the revised evolution of peer review administration paper issued by the AICPA. We noted that they had looked over the letter we had submitted with concerns, and they had made some significant changes in how that would look going forward. So instead of requiring administering entities to administer at least 1,000 peer reviews and have a full-time technical reviewer, they removed some of those requirements and instead went to a process where or they're proposing going to a process where they create benchmarks. So it doesn't rule someone out just because they don't do 1,000 peer reviews, but there will be benchmarks that the administering entity has to comply with in order to be considered acceptable in the administration of peer review. So this revised paper was good, and the board had asked me to just acknowledge that paper and that we were accepting of those changes and that we thank them for listening to some of our comments. So in your documents is my draft letter back to them. Draft is what I started out with.
Letter, Don.
Yeah.
Did you write all that by yourself?
I did. I wrote one line.
Signature?
No, Durham.
Questions on the letter, or any questions?
Oh,
I'm not going to tell you.
I don't accept it.
I think that concludes what I have on this agenda.
Thank you, Wendy. Does anybody else have anything for committee meetings this afternoon or to bring to the executive committee? Brad, have you got anything? Either one of you? We're adjourned. We'll see you at 8:30 in the morning.
Yes, and we do have Chick-fil-A, same as last time. Correct.
We get out in that 5:40. We get into the road. There might be some things. I don't even know where I'm going. I'm going out to the airport somewhere today.
Is that where you're staying?